I panted as I dragged my feet up the endless stone steps. My forehead was soaked with sweat, and my legs felt like lead. I looked up toward the distant mountain gate of the Qingyan sect. There were still hundreds of steps to go. My mouth twisted into a bitter smile. As expected of one of the four great sects of the Jianyan kingdom, they really built their front door in the clouds. I wasn't originally from this world. In my past life on Earth, I was just a hot-blooded young guy. My life ended in the most ridiculous way possible. I accidentally ate some mapo tofu, and the cook's husband beat me to death in a fit of rage. When I woke up, I was here in the Shenhuang continent. It wasn't just my soul that traveled. I had arrived here with my original body. It took me 3 days to accept this new reality. Surprisingly, I felt a surge of excitement. As a fan of the supernatural and the extraordinary, being in a world of martial arts was a dream come true. I was an orphan with no girlfriend and no attachments. This was my chance for a fresh start. I wanted to become a peerless powerhouse. Luckily, I hadn't come empty-handed. I had a mysterious bronze pagoda with me, something I'd picked up from a street stall back home. It was only the size of a finger, but when I fiddled with it, the thing actually burrowed into my body. It emitted a strange gray light and pulled me into a chaotic, void-like space. After months of tinkering, I figured out its power. It was a vessel for time. Inside that space, I could spend as much time as I wanted, while only a single second passed in the outside world. I didn't care about side effects. This meant I had infinite time to practice. There was just one problem. To practice martial arts in this world, you have to open the aperture. Geniuses do it naturally, but people like me need an opening pill. My talent was abysmal. To get my hands on those pills, I had to join a sect. I'd already been rejected by several small sects because of my poor potential. When I heard the prestigious Qingyan sect was recruiting, I traveled across mountains and rivers to try my luck. I finally reached the top of the stairs, nearly dying of exhaustion. I collapsed on the ground, gasping for air, before forcing myself to walk into the massive plaza. It was packed with over 1,000 people. Seeing the crowd of tall, sturdy candidates, I didn't even bother trying to squeeze through. I stood at the very back, squinting at the high platform in the distance. A middle-aged man in black robes stood there. He radiated an aura of authority that made the crowd go silent. "I am Elder Zhu Tai," he announced, his voice booming across the plaza. "I will be in charge of your entrance exam. The rules are simple. We test your bloodline. Bloodlines are ranked from grade 1 to 9. Anything above 9 is a god-grade bloodline. The higher your grade, the greater your potential. If you have a grade 4 bloodline or higher, you may join the Qingyan sect." Four disciples carried a massive green stone tablet onto the stage. It was 10 feet tall with 11 markings. The first mark was gray, followed by 10 blood-red lines. 1 red line meant a grade 1 bloodline. 9 lines meant grade 9. If all 10 lit up, it was the stuff of legends. The teenagers around me were buzzing with excitement. Most had tested themselves back home on low-level stones that only went up to grade 4. They all hoped they were secret geniuses. I tapped the shoulder of a young man in front of me. "Hey, genius," I whispered. "What does that gray mark at the bottom mean?" The kid beamed at being called a genius. He looked at my plain face and decided to be helpful. "That gray one, that represents trash grade. It means you're incapable of cultivation. In fact, the more you try to train, the more you damage your own body. You basically turn yourself into a cripple." My heart sank. I'd been rejected everywhere else because of my bloodline. If this stone was even more accurate, I didn't stand a chance. I turned around, ready to leave before I embarrassed myself. Suddenly, a graceful figure descended from the sky and landed next to Elder Zhu Tai. She wore a flowing white dress and possessed a cold, breathtaking beauty. The entire plaza went silent. "Is that Saintess Yin Qingyao?" someone whispered. "She's a genius who reached the divine sea realm at such a young age. She's already an elder." Elder Zhu Tai smiled at her. "Elder Yin, you've finally come to take a disciple? This year's batch looks promising. We might even find a grade 6 talent." Yin Qingyao ignored him. She stepped forward, her eyes scanning the crowd. "Today, I will take one disciple," she announced. The crowd erupted. To be the personal student of the Saintess was a fast track to the top of the world. But her next words silenced everyone. "However," she continued, "I will only accept someone with a bloodline below grade 2. If your bloodline is grade 1 or lower, you may be my disciple. The plaza fell into a stunned silence. Was she serious? People who came here usually had at least a grade 4 bloodline. A grade 2 bloodline was basically a commoner who could never progress, no matter how hard they worked. Elder Zhu Tai's face turned black. Elder Yun, the sect asked you to take a student. Are you mocking us? The rules didn't say what kind of student I had to take, she replied with a cold, defiant smirk. I like a challenge. What's the fun in training a grade 6 genius? I want someone below grade 2. If I can't find one, well, the sect can't blame me for trying. Zhu Tai looked like he was about to have a stroke. It was obvious she was just looking for an excuse to avoid teaching anyone. As for me, I stopped walking. This was the weirdest stroke of luck I'd ever heard of. Yun Qingyao clearly didn't want to be here. Her mind was focused entirely on her own cultivation, and she was only showing up because the sect forced her hand. She looked around the silent plaza, a faint, cold smile playing on her lips. Since no one was stepping forward to claim a grade 1 bloodline, she turned to leave. This was her perfect exit strategy. Elder Yun, I called out, my voice cutting through the quiet air. I believe I have a grade 1 bloodline. Thank you for taking me as your disciple. Yun Qingyao froze. Her elegant frame stiffened, and when she turned back, her face was a mask of frost. She looked like she couldn't believe her ears. Who in their right mind would travel all the way to the Qingyun sect's entrance exam with a grade 1 bloodline? It was the mark of a total loser, a talentless hack. The crowd shifted their gaze toward me. I felt hundreds of eyes landing on my plain clothes and average face. I was the definition of a background character, the kind of guy who disappears in a crowd of 3. You have a grade 1 bloodline? Yun Qingyao asked, her voice cold enough to draw blood. Master, I can go up and test right now, I said. I didn't give her a chance to back out. I sprinted onto the high platform and pressed my palm against the testing cup. Buzz. The cup hummed. The first blood-red notch lit up, then the second, third, and fourth. The teenagers in the plaza started sneering. A grade 4 bloodline meant I had passed the standard exam. I wasn't a loser. I was just a liar trying to trick the saintess. On the platform, Yun Qingyao let out a small sigh of relief. If I really had a grade 1 bloodline, she'd be stuck teaching a literal waste of space. But then, the cup hummed again. 5 notches. 6. 8. 9. The plaza erupted in a deafening roar. Everyone was stunned. Elder Zhu Tai's jaw hit the floor, his eyes bulging. 9 notches meant a grade 9 bloodline, a talent so rare it could signal the rise of the entire Qingyun sect. He rubbed his eyes, convinced he was hallucinating. Even Yun Qingyao was staring at me now, her cold eyes searching my face for some hint of hidden greatness. I looked as ordinary as a pebble. How could I be a grade 9 genius? Buzz, a 10th roar shook the cup. The 10th notch flared with a light so blinding it hurt to look at. Divine grade, someone screamed. He's a divine grade talent. The crowd went wild. They thought I had lied about being grade 1 just to get the saintess's attention. Elder Zhu Tai was actually crying tears of joy. In our kingdom, a grade 7 was a top-tier genius. A divine grade was unheard of, a myth standing right in front of them. I stared at the cup, my heart sinking. This isn't right, I thought. If I were a divine grade genius, I would have awakened my powers years ago. This thing had to be broken. The moment that thought crossed my mind, the 10 red lights flickered and died. In their place, a dull, gray light crawled up from the bottom of the cup. It was dim, ugly, and unmistakable. The silence that followed was like a bucket of ice water over the crowd's head. It wasn't divine grade. It was scrap grade, the legendary trash bloodline. It was worse than being a commoner. It meant that the more I practiced, the weaker I would become. I felt a pang of disappointment. I knew I wasn't a god-tier genius, but being labeled as actual trash hurt. Still, I had to stay focused. If I could just get Yun Qingyao to accept me, I'd have access to the sect's resources. With my secret pagoda, I could cultivate for an eternity. Even a piece of trash can reach the heavens if it has enough time. Yun Qingyao looked like she wanted to vomit. She had accidentally trapped herself. If I had been a grade 2, she might have sucked it up, but a scrap grade? Master, I said, bowing deeply with a grin. My bloodline is trash. That means I qualify to be your student, right? Are you certain? She asked, her voice tight. I can't teach you anything. You won't even be able to open your meridians. Master, I know I'm mediocre, I replied calmly. No one can teach me anyway. You don't have to do a thing. I'll handle my own cultivation. She looked like she was about to blow a fuse. How can a piece of trash who can't even start his journey cultivate on his own? I have my ways, I said. I just needed the foot in the door. The Qingyun sect had the best benefits of the 4 major sects. As long as I was in, I could hide in my pagoda and work in secret. Yin Qingyao suppressed her rage and nodded. Fine. Since you're so determined, I'll take you. But it's in name only. If you haven't opened your meridians in a year, you're out. Disciple Lu Rin pays his respects to Master. I shouted, beaming. Go practice, she snapped, turning to leave. Once you're an outer disciple, maybe then I'll look at you. Wait, Master, I called out. She stopped. What now? I heard that when a master takes a disciple, there's usually a greeting gift, I said, rubbing my hands together. You're a great elder. You wouldn't skip out on that, right? The air around her turned frigid. The nerve of this trash, asking for a gift. I saw her eyes darken and quickly added, I mean, if you don't want to, it's fine. With a flick of her wrist, a flash of fire erupted in her palm. A 3-foot-long sword appeared and clattered onto the stone at my feet. The blade was a translucent, fiery red, looking more like carved jade than metal. The fire spirit sword, she hissed. There's your gift. She vanished before I could even say thank you. I picked up the sword, its warmth seeping into my hands. This was a low-level spirit tool. A normal person could work their entire life and never even see one of these, let alone own it. The other students stared at me with pure, unfiltered envy. I was a scrap-grade loser, yet I had just landed the Saintess as a teacher, a spirit tool in my hand, and a spot in the sect. I had basically hit the lottery. Elder Zhutai looked at me with a black expression. Since you've joined Elder Yun's lineage, you are now an official disciple. Stand aside. Once the rest are finished, I'll take you to the living quarters. The sect had just accepted a disciple with a scrap-grade bloodline. If word got out, the other 3 major sects would laugh themselves to death. I didn't care. I held the fire spirit sword close to my chest and stood to the side of the high platform, waiting patiently. The other teenagers in the square watched me with complicated expressions. Most of them were kids from wealthy families. Their bloodlines were at least grade 4. They couldn't wrap their heads around it. How did a loser with a trash bloodline become the very first person to join the Qingyun sect this year? Elder Zhutai didn't waste any more time. Under his command, the long line of candidates moved toward the testing stone. Xiao Huahua, grade 4 bloodline. Wang Feng, grade 4 bloodline. Yang Rong, grade 5 bloodline. I watched as the stone lit up repeatedly. Most hit 4 scales, and a few even hit 5. I couldn't help but feel a pang of envy. If I had a grade 4 or 5 bloodline, I wouldn't have spent my time in this world scrubbing floors and carrying trays just to stay alive. Without Yin Qingyao stepping in, I'd probably be looking for another waiter job right now. Even with the mysterious pagoda in my mind, a body this week was no better than being crippled. The testing lasted for half an hour. Out of 300 people, everyone had at least a grade 4 bloodline. Elder Zhutai looked over the crowd with a wide, satisfied smile. 10 grade 5 geniuses in one batch was a record high. From this moment on, you are official entry-level disciples of the Qingyun sect, the elder announced. These are your identity tokens. They prove your status and allow you to move freely within the sect grounds. 2 disciples hauled out a massive, sealed bronze chest. When they popped the lid, I saw hundreds of golden wooden tokens stacked neatly inside. As they began carving names into the wood, the excitement in the air became electric. Joining one of the 4 great sects of the Jianyun kingdom was like a carp leaping through the dragon's gate. Our lives had changed forever. When I received my token, I ran my thumb over the intricate dragon and phoenix carvings around my name, Lu Ren. I felt a surge of genuine emotion. I bowed deeply to the elder and stepped back. Once everyone was processed, Elder Zhutai led us toward the residential area. The scale of the place was breathtaking. Massive peaks pierced the clouds, connected by swaying iron chain bridges. Ancient trees lined the paths, and the scent of flowers filled the air. It felt like a paradise for immortals. We stopped halfway up one of the mountains where rows of elegant courtyards sat nestled against the slopes. "These are your dorms," the elders said, pointing to the buildings. 2 people per courtyard. Inside, you will find the sect rules. Read them. They detail exactly what you can and cannot do. Tomorrow morning, head to the martial hall to receive your opening pill for the awakening ceremony. The crowd cheered. As entry-level disciples, we were entitled to 1 opening pill every month for a year. If you couldn't open your spiritual apertures within that year, you were kicked out. For these grade 4 kids, 1 or 2 pills were usually enough to turn them into official martial artists. As soon as Zhu Tai left, everyone scrambled to pick their courtyards. I found one and claimed a room. It was simple, just a bed and a table. On the table sat 2 books, Sect Rules and Foundations of the Martial Way. I flipped through the foundation book, soaking up the knowledge. Martial arts were divided into stages: opening aperture, Lingxi, Yunhe, Shanhai, and Tiangang. Once a warrior opened 7 apertures, they could push for the Lingxi realm. I was deep into the text when I heard footsteps. A lean, handsome boy about 15 years old walked in. "Can I help you?" I asked. "Junior brother Lu Ron, I won't beat around the bush," he said, his voice direct. "My name is Xiaohuahua. I'm here to talk business." I blinked. "Business? Between us. Tomorrow, we get our opening pills," Xiaohuahua said. "I want to buy yours." I froze. He didn't wait for me to respond. "Look, don't take this the wrong way, but you have a scrap-grade bloodline. Even if you swallowed 100 pills, you probably won't open a single aperture. Why waste it? Sell it to me instead." I didn't get angry. I just looked at him. "With your talent, why are you in such a rush?" "I want to be sure," he said, his eyes burning with ambition. "I might not succeed with just 1 pill. If I have yours, I can guarantee a breakthrough tomorrow. Being a martial artist 1 day earlier means being 1 step ahead of everyone else." I felt a spark of interest. "What's your price?" Xiaohuahua held up 2 fingers. "The sect values these at 15,000 copper coins. I'll give you 20,000. 20,000? My jaw nearly hit the floor. In this kingdom, the purchasing power of copper was similar to the money in my old world. A regular person earned maybe 3,000 a month. As a waiter, I had been making 1,500. This kid was offering me over a year's salary for a single pill. Seeing my shocked face, Xiaohuahua let out a smug, confident grin. For my simple clothes, Xiaohuahua probably thought I was some poor kid from the streets. To a guy like me, 20,000 copper coins should have been a fortune. Besides, with my scrap-grade bloodline, everyone assumed the opening pill was useless to me anyway. But I just looked at him and shook my head. "Not selling." The smug grin froze on his face. He looked at me like I'd just grown a second head. "What?" I smiled back, calm as could be. "Senior brother Xiao, if you want my pill, I'm sure the other disciples want it too. I've decided to hold an auction tomorrow. Highest bidder wins. I needed money more than anything right now. There was no way I was letting it go for a measly 20,000. Xiaohuahua looked like he was about to cough up blood. If he'd known I was this much of a black-hearted merchant, he probably wouldn't have bothered coming here privately. He suppressed his anger, forcing a stiff smile back onto his face. "Junior brother Lu Ron, let's be reasonable. Name your price. We can settle this right here, privately." He was desperate. He wanted to be the very first disciple to open his aperture tomorrow. Being first meant catching the eyes of the sect elders. It meant glory, attention, and potentially extra rewards from the sect. I leaned back, pretending to think it over. "Since you're being so sincere, I'll give you a sincere price. 100,000 copper coins." Xiaohuahua's eyes nearly popped out of his skull. 100,000. "Oh, is that too low?" I asked innocently. "You're right. With so many people wanting it, maybe 200,000 is more fair." He looked like he'd been hit by a physical blow. He'd offered 20,000, and I'd just flipped it 10 times over. He was rich, but he wasn't an idiot. Only a fool would pay 200,000 for a single opening pill. "Junior brother, you should just keep that pill for yourself," he hissed, his eyes narrowing. He turned to leave. "Wait," I called out. He stopped, and I pointed to the long sword sitting on my table. It was the gift the saintess had given me earlier. "Do you want this fire spirit sword?" He spun around, eyes wide. "You're selling that?" "That was a gift from the saintess. She gave it to me, so it's mine," I said with a shrug. I can't use it yet, and I'd rather have the resources. Xiaohua hesitated. This was a low-grade spiritual weapon. It was worth at least 1,000,000 copper coins. Even for a kid from a wealthy family, that was a staggering amount. It's worth 1,000,000, he muttered, his face pale. I don't have that kind of money on me. My family only gives me 100,000 a month for an allowance. That's fine, I said, a plan forming in my mind. You can pay in installments. Installments? He looked confused. Pay me 20% down, I explained. The rest you can pay over a year. I'll just charge you a small 10% interest fee. What do you think? He'd never heard of such a thing, but he understood the math. He nodded eagerly. If he succeeded in opening his aperture tomorrow, his family would increase his allowance anyway. He could afford it, and he'd get the power of the sword right now. We quickly wrote up a contract and signed it. He handed over 20 banknotes, each worth 10,000 copper coins. In this kingdom, these were as good as gold. Once the deal was done, he grabbed the sword and practically ran out of the room. I tucked the 20 banknotes into my robe and took a deep breath. I closed my eyes and cleared my mind. That familiar, sharp pain pierced through my brain, and a second later, the world shifted. I was standing in a vast, empty void. There was nothing here but a small, humble thatched hut and some scattered boulders and wood. This was the tower space. I could stay here for 3 or 5 years, and only a single night would pass in the outside world. My lifespan wouldn't even be affected, as long as I had enough food. If I didn't, I'd starve to death in a vacuum. My body is still too weak, I whispered to myself. If I could train my body to its absolute limit, maybe I could force an aperture to open regardless of my talent. If 10 years of training wasn't enough, I'd do 100. If 100 wasn't enough, I'd do 1,000. With the tower space, I had all the time in the world. I just needed the resources. I left the space and headed straight for the sect's kitchen. It was dinner time, and the hall was packed with disciples. I ignored them and slipped into the back where the head chef, a portly middle-aged man, was working. Hey, kid, the dining hall is out there, he barked. I didn't say a word. I just slipped a banknote for 1,000 copper into his hand. His eyes bulged. He tried to give it back, looking terrified of where a kid like me got that kind of cash. Keep it, I said firmly. I want to buy spirit rice. 200,000 copper coins worth. The chef nearly fainted. Spirit rice was packed with spiritual energy, perfect for those about to become martial artists. It was expensive, 50 copper per pound. 1 pound could last a person 5 days. 200,000 coins would buy 4,000 pounds of rice. It was enough to feed one person for 20,000 days. Do you have it? I asked. Yes, of course, he stammered. He didn't ask questions. He led me to the back warehouse, filled with bags of rice. I walked up to the stacks and placed my hand on a bag. In an instant, it vanished into my tower space. The chef's jaw hit the floor. He clearly thought I had some legendary spatial treasure like a ring or a bracelet. Items so expensive only the highest nobility owned them. I swept 39 more bags into my space and handed over the rest of the money. Keep this quiet, I warned him. I headed back to my room, my heart racing. I looked at the mountain of spirit rice now sitting in my secret space. The training was about to begin. Having all this spirit rice gave me a massive sense of security. I had enough food to last me nearly 20,000 days. That was 55 years. I refused to believe that I couldn't unlock my spiritual aperture in that time. I settled in and began to grind. I already had a plan. My current physical condition was pathetic compared to the people of the Xinhuang continent. As for my talent, it was scrap-grade bloodline, the absolute bottom of the barrel. If I wanted to get stronger, I had to be relentless. I needed to build a physical foundation before I even attempted to open my aperture. Constant dripping wears away a stone. Even with zero talent, I had something no one else did: infinite time. I started my routine. Every single day, I spent 12 hours pushing my body to the limit. I did 1,000 push-ups and 1,000 sit-ups. For the first few days, it was pure agony. I could barely finish. My entire body felt like it was being torn apart. But after a month, my body adapted to the intensity. I could feel the change. I was sturdier, and my muscles were starting to show definition. So I doubled it. 2,000 push-ups. 2,000 sit-ups. A 20-kilometer run around my small hut. I kept this up for 3 full years. By the end of those 3 years, I looked lean with my clothes on, but underneath, I was ripped. My strength had multiplied. Only then did I feel like my physical body was finally on par with the other entry-level disciples. I knew that with my talent, taking an aperture pill would probably do nothing. I decided to try opening it on my own. No matter how bad my talent was, I didn't believe I could fail for 60 years straight. My life became a cycle of high-intensity training and eating spirit rice to recover. I spent 6 hours exercising and 3 hours focused solely on opening my aperture. I concentrated all my energy into my lower abdomen, where the first spiritual aperture was supposed to be located according to the basic manuals. The remaining 3 hours were for sleep. Days turned into years. A decade flew by in a flash. Inside the tower space, my appearance didn't change, but I was starting to get restless. 50 years passed. 50 years of nothing but boring, repetitive training. Anyone else would have gone insane. But I was driven by a single obsession. I had to open that aperture. If I didn't, I would always be a nobody in this world. I didn't come here to be mediocre. Still, I never imagined that 50 years wouldn't be enough. This scrap-grade bloodline was truly terrifying. I was lucky I was in the tower space where only a second had passed outside. If I were in the real world, I'd already have 1 foot in the grave. 50 years, I muttered, shaking my head bitterly. Even an iron rod should have been ground into a needle by now. My body had reached its absolute limit thanks to the spirit rice, but the aperture remained closed. I had enough rice for 3 more years. If I couldn't do it by then, I'd have to gamble on the pills. 1 year passed, then 2, then 3. I had been in the tower space for 55 years. My lower abdomen felt like a void. I was about to give up and leave the space when suddenly, a searing heat surged in my gut. It felt like I was being branded from the inside. That burning power dragged the blood and energy from my entire body toward my lower abdomen. It felt like a violent whirlpool was churning inside me. The pain was unbearable. I collapsed, curling into a ball and rolling on the floor. After what felt like an eternity, I heard a sharp crack, like an eggshell breaking. The pain vanished instantly. In its place, a strange, powerful energy began to gather in my gut. I froze, then let out a wild, hysterical laugh that echoed through the empty tower. 55 years. It took 55 years, but I finally did it. I had opened my first spiritual aperture. I could feel a subtle shift in my very being. I could now channel that strange energy into my limbs. My strength skyrocketed. I felt like I could punch with 1,000 pounds of force. I could probably kill a bull with a single blow now. This was the power of a martial artist. I gripped my fists, feeling the raw power flowing from the aperture. I was no longer a weakling. I had spent 20,000 copper coins and over half a century of life, but in the outside world, only a single second had passed. The other disciples, even the geniuses with high-grade bloodlines, still had to rely on pills to reach this stage. I had done it through pure, grueling effort. I realized then that I needed money. Lots of it. As long as I had enough resources, it didn't matter how bad my talent was. My cultivation speed would eventually leave any genius in the dust. I decided right then to sell the aperture pill I was supposed to receive the next day. I didn't need it anymore, and since Yahello wanted it so badly, I knew I could fetch a high price at an auction. I left the tower space, read through the disciple rules, and went to sleep. The next morning, several elders gathered on a mountain peak overlooking the martial hall. A large plaque hung over the entrance. Today was the day the new disciples would receive their aperture pills and attempt their awakening ceremony. A flash of white silk caught their eyes as Yun Qingyao flew down and landed near them. The elders were surprised. A green-robed elder looked at her and scoffed. "Elder Yun, why are you here? You actually took that scrap-grade kid as a disciple. Don't tell me you're here to watch him fail. A scrap-grade bloodline can't open an aperture, no matter how many pills he swallows." Yun Qingyao's voice was cold. "What's wrong with a scrap-grade bloodline? I've always believed there are no useless bloodlines, only useless people." She had thought about it a lot since yesterday. A boy who knew he couldn't cultivate but still chose to try deserved a chance. She wasn't here because she expected him to succeed. She was here because she respected his attitude. Down at the martial hall, the new disciples were buzzing with excitement. I stood at the back of the crowd. Elder Zhu Tai stood at the entrance, looking over us. Starting today, you will receive one aperture pill every month for a year, or until you successfully open your aperture, he announced. After you receive your pill, you will swallow it here for the ceremony. Anyone who succeeds today will be allowed to borrow a high-grade human rank martial technique for 6 months. The crowd went wild. To them, this was the start of their journey. To me, it was just the next step in a journey I had already been on for 55 years. In this world, martial techniques are ranked: human, earth, heaven, and beyond. Each rank is split into low, mid, and high grades. Most of the disciples here came from wealthy families, but even they rarely had the chance to touch a high-grade human rank technique. If they succeeded today, they'd get access to one. Success meant their combat power would skyrocket. I have to succeed today no matter what, one disciple whispered, his eyes burning with ambition. I have a grade 5 bloodline. There's no way I'll fail. The crowd was restless. Elder Zhu Tai stepped out from the martial hall, carrying a massive wooden box. Before he even opened it, the thick, sweet scent of medicinal herbs filled the air. He lifted the lid, revealing rows of pearl-like pills glowing with a soft luster. These were aperture pills. As the saying goes, without an aperture, a beast cannot take form and a human cannot cultivate. Zhu Tai's voice boomed. Opening your spiritual aperture is your ticket to the path of power. Now line up, take your pill, sit on the plaza, and focus. The disciples scrambled into line. I moved with them, eventually reaching the front and taking my pill. Far off in the distance, I saw Yun Qingyao watching me. A small smile played on her lips. I could tell she was curious. If a scrap-grade bloodline actually managed to awaken, it would shock the entire Jiangyan kingdom. But her smile didn't last long. I held my pill high in the air and shouted at the top of my lungs. I'm auctioning off my aperture pill. Highest bidder takes it. Starting price is 10,000 copper coins. Minimum raise is 10,000. The entire plaza went silent. The disciples froze. Elder Zhu Tai's jaw dropped. Even Yun Qingyao looked like she'd been slapped. She couldn't believe it. I had just received a life-changing resource, and I was selling it for cash? Truly, rotten wood cannot be carved, she muttered, her face darkening with anger. She had given me a chance, and she felt like I was throwing it in her face. Disappointed and disgusted, she turned around and vanished. To her, I was no longer a disciple worth her time. I was just a failure who had given up before even trying. The other elders watching from the shadows were just as stunned. Selling your awakening pill on the first day? It was unheard of. Elder Zhu Tai marched toward me, his face flushed with rage. Lu Ren, you have a scrap-grade bloodline, and instead of trying to improve, you're auctioning your pill? This is an insult to the sect. It's an insult to your master. I bowed slightly, keeping my voice calm. Elder, I meant no disrespect. No disrespect? Zhu Tai barked. The rules are clear. Even if your talent is weak, you must strive to be a warrior. You're giving up because the odds are slim. You misunderstand, Elder, I said, looking him in the eye. I'm selling it because I've already opened my aperture. Zhu Tai started shaking. Nonsense. Absolute lies. You haven't even swallowed the pill. How could you possibly awaken? Your master is a genius with a grade 7 bloodline, and even she took a month to awaken without a pill. And you expect me to believe you did it in a day? The other disciples started laughing. They thought I'd finally lost my mind. Elder, it's the truth, I said, stepping closer. If you don't believe me, test me yourself. Seeing my confidence, Zhu Tai frowned. He reached out and pressed his palm against my abdomen. His eyes went wide. He felt it, a faint, steady pulse of spiritual energy. Qi is gathering. You actually did it? He stared at me like I was a ghost. This is impossible. A scrap-grade bloodline awakened. The laughter died instantly. The disciples looked at each other in shock. They were still waiting for their pills to work, and I had already finished the race. How? Zhu Tai asked, his voice trembling. I had my story ready. I had a dream, Elder. I saw an old man with the air of an immortal. He told me I had the potential of the earth. When I woke up, my stomach felt like it was on fire, and my aperture was open. An immortal's guidance? Zhu Tai gasped. That's a legend. The ancestor's path. It's rare, but it has happened before. There was a disciple long ago with weak talent who suddenly awakened and reached the Lingxi realm. This is a blessing from the heavens, Lu Run. He patted my shoulder, his anger replaced by pure awe. You must work hard. If you can reach the Lingxi realm with a scrap-grade bloodline, you'll be a miracle. I will remember your teachings, I replied with a respectful bow. So, about the pill? Zhu Tai waved his hand, completely indifferent now. It's yours. Do what you want with it. I turned back to the crowd. All right, you heard him. Who wants it? The atmosphere turned electric. Every disciple knew that a second pill could double their chances of success or speed up their progress. Plus, if they awakened today, they got that high-grade technique. 10,000, someone yelled. 20,000. 50,000. The bidding war was fierce. Even Xiao Huahua looked like he wanted to jump in, but he had spent all his money on his fire sword. Finally, a disciple with a grade 4 bloodline shouted, 30,000 copper coins. I handed over the pill and took the stack of bills. 30,000. It was a good start. Lu Run, wait, Zhu Tai called out. He tossed me a bronze token. Since you've awakened, take this to the weapon pavilion. You've earned your choice of a high-grade human rank technique. Thank you, Elder. I tucked the token away and walked off toward the pavilion. Behind me, I could feel the envious stares of 100 disciples. They still couldn't wrap their heads around it. This scrap grade, failure was currently the only one moving forward. I was the first to become an official disciple, and the first to successfully open my spiritual aperture. I was a true martial artist now. The other disciples, people with grade 4 and grade 5 bloodlines, could only stare in shock. They were being stepped on by someone with a scrap-grade bloodline, and they hated every second of it. As I walked away, I thought about the path ahead. According to the basics of martial arts, the human body hides 7 spiritual apertures. The more you open, the stronger you become. Now that I'd cracked the first one, the rest would eventually follow. But first, I needed a way to fight. After a short walk across the massive central plaza, I arrived at a 3-story building, the weapon pavilion. This was the branch for new disciples, so the best things inside were high-grade human rank techniques. If I wanted anything better, I'd have to earn my way into the inner sect. I stepped inside and felt my eyes widen. Rows upon rows of bookshelves were packed with weapons and secret manuals. The hall was divided into 3 clear sections, low-grade, mid-grade, and high-grade. I headed straight for the high-grade section, but an elderly guard stopped me. New disciples can only borrow 1 low or mid-grade manual per month, he grunted. I didn't say a word. I just pulled out the bronze token Zhu Tai had given me. Elder, I've already opened my aperture. The old man's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He looked at the token, then at me, his respect growing instantly. I see. In that case, you can choose 1 high-grade human rank technique. You can keep it for 6 months. Thank you, Elder. I hurried into the high-grade area and started flipping through the manuals. My excitement died almost instantly. Incantation palms, thunderous fist, raindrop sword. The descriptions were insane. One technique claimed my fists would move like lightning. Another said my fingers would become as sharp as swords. I could read the words, but I had no idea how to actually do any of it. I thought about the stories I'd read in my past life where the hero picks up a god-tier manual and masters it in seconds. What a joke. Novels really are full of lies. I realized my limits. I had a scrap-grade bloodline. Trying to force myself to learn a high-grade technique would be a massive waste of time. I needed something practical. I walked back to the low-grade section and picked up a manual called Tiger Fist. It was perfect. It had clear diagrams showing exactly how to position my body and simple text explaining the movements. This was what I needed. I believed that even the simplest technique could become deadly if practiced 10,000 times. I took the book back to the elder. Elder, if I give up my right to a high-grade technique, can I take a few low-grade ones instead? What did you say? The elder looked at me like I'd lost my mind. A high-grade technique makes you significantly stronger than someone using a low-grade one. Disciples kill themselves doing missions just to get their hands on these. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said firmly. He sighed, shaking his head. Fine. If you're passing on the high-grade stuff, you can take 3 low-grade manuals for 6 months. I went back and picked 3 that covered all my bases. Tiger Fist for offense, 8 trigram palms for defense, and Spirit Cat Steps for movement. I brought them to the desk to register. When the elder saw my name on the form, he froze. You're Lu Ren? I felt a bit awkward. Yes. The whole elder council knows about you, he muttered, frowning. Not because of your talent, but because the holy maiden, Yin Xinyao, took a scrap grade student. It was the talk of the sect yesterday. But wait, if you're scrap grade, how did you open an aperture? It should be impossible, even with pills. Elder Zhu Tai said I received a blessing from the heavens, I explained. Check for yourself. The elder placed a hand on my stomach. When he felt the ripple of spiritual energy, his jaw dropped. Good heavens, you really did it. No wonder you want the simpler techniques. You're being realistic. He stroked his beard and handed the books back. Keep them as long as you want. Just don't lend them to anyone else. A scrap grade opening an aperture is a miracle, but mastering a technique, that might take you years. I want to see if you can actually pull it off. I won't let my master down, I promised. I left the pavilion and headed straight for the cafeteria. I wanted to buy 300,000 copper coins worth of spiritual rice to fuel my training, but the head chef didn't have that much in stock. I ended up leaving the money with him so he could buy a bulk shipment during his next supply run in a month. Back at my dorm, I went into the courtyard and opened Tiger Fist. The style was meant to mimic a predatory tiger. I started mimicking the diagrams, throwing punches and shifting my weight. It felt clumsy. After an hour, I was sweating and frustrated, looking more like a dancing chicken than a tiger. Practicing Tiger Fist, junior brother Lu? I stopped and wiped my brow. Xiao Huohuo was standing there, looking amused. How did you know? He smiled and suddenly blurred into motion. His fists lunged forward like a pouncing beast, his movements full of power and aggression. You know it too? I asked, stunned. My family has this technique, he said, relaxing his stance. But I'm confused. You earned a high-grade technique today. Why are you wasting time with this? I'm scrap grade, brother Xiao, I said with a shrug. I'd rather master a simple punch than fail at a complex one. He nodded slowly. I suppose that's a miracle in itself. But I wonder, how long will it take you to reach great achievement? Great achievement? I asked. What's that? Most techniques are ranked by mastery, he explained. Entry, small achievement, great achievement, and perfection. Most martial artists are happy if they can just reach great achievement. 7 days for small achievement, Xiao Huohua continued, his voice full of casual confidence. Half a month for great achievement. If you were a freak of nature like the Holy Maiden, you could probably hit great achievement in just 3 days. I listened in silence, a bitter realization sinking in. Bloodline talent really was everything in this world. I shook off the feeling and forced a polite smile. Then I wish you a speedy path to perfection, brother Xiao, I said. I don't actually plan on taking Tiger Fist that far. Once I get the hang of it, I'll move on to middle grade or high grade techniques. Xiao Huohua shook his head, looking at me with something like pity. All right, junior brother Lu. Keep at it. With a scrap grade bloodline, even reaching the entry level won't be easy. He headed back to his room, leaving me alone in the courtyard. I kept practicing, throwing punch after punch, but the movements felt hollow. I couldn't even reach the entry level. Still, I didn't panic. I had spent 55 years in the tower space just to open a single aperture. I wasn't afraid of a little hard work. For the next month, our routine stayed the same. We trained hard and met up only to walk to the dining hall for meals. Finally, Xiao Huohua successfully opened his first aperture. He was ecstatic, but when he saw I was still stuck on the basics of Tiger Fist, he tried to give me some pointers. After a few attempts, he gave up. His face was a mask of frustration. The scrap-grade bloodline is terrifying, he muttered. I can't teach you. I don't think even the Holy Maiden could help you at this point. My talent is indeed poor, brother Xiao, I said, not letting his words sting. I won't waste any more of your time. I'll just keep grinding at my own pace. Actually, I need to head out for a bit. I checked the calendar. The dining hall's bulk shipment should have arrived by now. Spending a month training in the real world felt like a massive waste of time. If I could just get into the tower space, I wouldn't have to worry. My 30,000 copper coins could buy 60 bags of spiritual rice. That was enough to fuel 82 years of training. As I walked away, I heard Xiao Huohua talking to himself. Now that I've opened my aperture, I can go to the weapon pavilion. If I find a good sword manual to match this fire spirit sword, Those rankless disciples won't stand a chance. Deep inside the Qingyun sect, in a solemn pavilion, a dozen elders sat with their eyes closed. My master, Yin Qingyao, walked in. Before anyone could speak, she addressed them coldly. I've been in seclusion, she said. I'm currently creating my own sword technique. The elders gasped. A goat-bearded old man looked shocked. They were all in the divine sea realm, just like her, but none of them had the skill to create their own martial arts yet. It's nearly finished, Yin Qingyao added, taking her seat. Let's get down to business, the goat-bearded elder said, regaining his composure. In 1 month, the Huangdao sect is bringing 3 new disciples for an exchange. We lost to the Lihua sect and the Iron Sword sect in previous years. If we lose again, we won't be able to hold our heads up. I heard the Huangdao sect recruited a grade 6 genius, another elder frowned. Our new disciples aren't ready for that. Yin Qingyao looked bored. Is this why you called me here, great elder? The great elder stroked his beard. Elder Yin, we asked you to take a disciple specifically for this exchange. My disciple is scrap grade, she replied flatly. He can barely open an aperture. There's nothing I can do. She didn't want to waste time teaching. She wanted to finish her sword technique. Why bother with a student who had no future? Elder Yun, you really have a keen eye, one elder said, his voice dripping with envy. That scrap-grade disciple of yours is incredible. He received a god's blessing and was the first among the new recruits to open his aperture. Yun Qingyao froze. What? She couldn't believe it. The student she had taken by mistake had actually succeeded? He opened it right after joining, the great elder added. Even you weren't that fast. It might be a fluke of luck, but an aperture is an aperture. You need to train him well. Yun Qingyao's mind raced. So that's why I was so desperate for the aperture pill. I hadn't been lazy or greedy. I was a genius at business, selling a pill I no longer needed. She felt a sudden pang of guilt for how she had treated me. The sect master has ordered it, the great elder continued. You must bring your disciple to the exchange. Yin Qingyao snapped out of her thoughts and smiled. I accept. You do? The great elder looked surprised. He expected a fight. I took him in, so I will make him great, she said confidently. He has my fire spirit sword. I'll teach him my custom sword technique. Even with a scrap-grade bloodline, I can make him a master. If he reaches entry level, he'll open 2 more apertures. If he hits great achievement, he'll open 6. The great elder laughed. If you can actually turn a scrap-grade student into a warrior, our sect's reputation will soar. Yun Qingyao stood up, eager to find me. Then I'll go check on my disciple. Back at the courtyard, Xiaohuahua was practicing with the fire spirit sword I had sold him. He looked like a blur of red light. This fire sword technique is amazing, he gloated. Once I hit great achievement, nobody can stop me. Those 20,000 coins were a steal. He lunged forward, imagining his future glory. But suddenly, a shadow moved faster than he could react. A slender palm slammed into his chest with explosive force. Xiaohuahua let out a strangled cry, coughing up blood as he was sent flying backward, crashing hard onto the dirt. When Xiaohuahua looked up and saw the figure standing over him, the pain on his face turned to pure terror. His voice trembled as he spoke. Sao? Saintess? Her Highness Yun Qingyao. My master didn't say a word. She used her internal energy to pull the fire spirit sword off the ground and into her hand. She pointed the blade directly at Xiaohuahua's throat, her eyes flashing with cold fury. You have quite the nerve, she said, her voice like ice. How dare you bully my disciple and steal the sword I gave him? My disciple might have a scrap-grade bloodline, but don't forget he has a master. The air around her grew cold, as if she were about to freeze Xiaohuahua where he lay. In her mind, she saw a heartbreaking image, her poor, talentless disciple being harassed and beaten by his peers until he was forced to give up his only treasure. Xiaohuahua started shaking uncontrollably. Saintess, please. You've got it all wrong. What is there to misunderstand? She snapped. The sword in your hand is the one I gave to Lu Ren. It's true. Xiaohuahua scrambled to explain, terrified she might kill him on the spot. Even if she executed him right here, his family wouldn't dare utter a single word of protest against the saintess of the Jiangyan kingdom. I didn't steal it. He sold it to me. Nonsense, Yun Qingyao said. This sword is worth at least 1,000,000 copper coins. How could a new disciple like you afford it? I couldn't. Not all at once. Xiaohua's eyes filled with tears. He let me pay in installments. I gave him 20,000 up front. I'm supposed to pay him 88,000 a month for the next 10 months, plus interest. Installments? Interest? Yun Qingyao stared at him, her eyes wide. She looked like she had just heard the most ridiculous thing in the world. I'm not lying. When he comes back, we can confront him together. No need. Yun Qingyao pulled the sword back and tossed 20,000 coins worth of notes at his face. This sword belongs to me now. Get out. Xiaohuo wanted to cry. The sword was gone, and the fire sword technique he had just borrowed from the library was now useless. Saintus, what about Lu Ren? What do I do when he comes for the money? Tell him you don't have it, she said, sounding annoyed. If he complains, give him a beating. That useless brat needs to learn a lesson about focus instead of playing these games. She stomped away, fuming. This was the first time in 20 years she had ever given someone a gift, and the brat had turned around and sold it. She had planned to spend her time teaching me, but now she felt like slapping me into the next life instead. A little while later, I returned to the dorms, completely unaware of the drama. I was excited. I needed a secure place to enter the tower space because my mind had to be completely relaxed for the transition. I locked my door and slipped inside the tower. I looked at the 60 bags of spiritual rice I had managed to stockpile. Based on my calculations, this was enough to sustain me for 82 years of internal time. I had spent a month in the real world trying to learn the tiger fist technique without making any progress. But now, I had 82 years. I wasn't afraid of failing anymore. I pulled out the manual and began. For someone with my scrap-grade talent, training was a grueling, uphill battle. It took me 2 full years of constant practice just to reach this small success stage of the tiger fist. A genius like Xiaohuo would have reached that level in 3 days. The gap was depressing, but I didn't let it stop me. So what if my talent is bad? I told myself. I have time. 30 years passed in the blink of an eye inside the tower. My body moved like a predator. I lunged forward, my fists blurring as they tore through the air, creating a whistling sound that vibrated in my chest. Huh! I let out a sharp shout and slammed my fist into a massive boulder. The rock exploded. Shards of stone flew everywhere. I looked at my hands and smiled. I had reached great circle perfection. Even though the tiger fist was a low-tier technique, at maximum mastery, it was more powerful than many mid-tier skills. I felt a surge of warmth in my palms. My heart hammered. 2 more spiritual apertures had opened. 6 apertures, I whispered, feeling the raw power flowing through me. I have 6 now. The feeling of gaining strength was addictive. I didn't stop. I moved on to the 8 trigrams palm, a defensive technique. This one was much harder. It took me 35 years of repetitive, agonizing practice to master it to the great circle stage. With my remaining 15 years, I focused on the link step for movement. I managed to reach large success before my time ran out. 50 years of bitter cultivation had passed. I had opened 3 more apertures during that time, bringing my total to 6. In the real world, only a second had passed. It was a trade-off that would drive most people insane, but for me, it was the only way. I was just 1 aperture away from the Spirit Creek realm. My physical strength had increased 5-fold. Back in my old world, hitting with 6,000 pounds of force was impossible. Here, it was just the beginning. I stepped out of the tower space and took a deep breath of the fresh, outside air. As much as I loved the power, the isolation of the tower was suffocating. I checked the time. A month had passed in the real world. Time to collect, I muttered. Xiaohuo owed me 88,000 coins. That was enough to buy another 25 years of rice. Maybe in those 25 years, I could finally reach the 7th aperture. I walked over to Xiaohuo's room and knocked. Inside, Xiaohuo was sitting on his bed, brooding. He was miserable. He had the notes for a sword technique he couldn't use, and he couldn't trade them for a new book for another month. He felt like a dark cloud had been following him ever since he met me. That trash Lu Run. He got me slapped by the Saintus. My chest still burns, he growled to himself. Just let him come ask for money. I'll show him what happens to scammers. Just then, I pushed the door open. Senior brother Xiao? Xiaohuo's eyes lit up with a predatory glint. You're finally here. It was finally time for Xiaohuahua to vent his frustration. He looked at me, struggling to suppress his inner smugness. Junior brother Lu Ren, is there something you need? A month is up, I said, squinting at him with a smile. 88,000 coins. It's time to pay up. Xiaohuahua let out a cold laugh. And if I don't, what are you going to do about it? My expression shifted. What did you say? I earned this debt with my own skill, he sneered, his face practically begging for a punch. Why should I bother paying you back? My voice turned cold. Senior brother Xiao, if you really intend to stiff me, don't blame me for being impolite. I hadn't expected to run into a deadbeat debtor in this world, too. But things were different here. This was a world where strength ruled. I had already opened 6 spiritual apertures. If he wouldn't pay, I'd just have to find a way to make him. Xiaohuahua couldn't help himself. He burst out laughing and crossed his arms over his chest. Junior brother Lu Ren, you have a scrap-grade bloodline. You couldn't even master the basic tiger fist. How exactly are you going to be impolite to me? I'll stand right here. If you can even touch me, I'll call you daddy from now on. He wasn't just being arrogant. He truly believed I was pathetic. In his mind, I had spent a month failing to learn a single move. Since we both supposedly only had one aperture open, there was no way I could be his match. Fine, I said with a thin smile. I'll take you up on that. Son. I lunged forward. My palm struck out toward his chest, glowing with a mist-like spiritual energy. The sheer force of the blow caused the air to crackle with a sharp pop. Xiaohuahua's face went pale. He never expected this kind of power. With no time to dodge, he threw a desperate punch to counter me. His strike was fierce, executed with the precision of a master-level tiger fist, a blow strong enough to take down a literal tiger. The moment our attacks collided, Xiaohuahua looked like he'd been hit by a bolt of lightning. He was sent flying backward, slamming into the wall before collapsing and coughing up a mouthful of blood. How do you have this much power? He wheezed. His arm was nearly dislocated, and pain radiated through his entire body. He was in shock. This wasn't the strength of a one-aperture warrior. Even someone with 3 or 4 shouldn't have been this strong. To be honest, senior brother, I said, watching him struggle. I felt a surge of satisfaction. The Immortal's blessing didn't just give me 1 aperture. I've opened 6. I hadn't even used my full strength. That was barely half power. If I had gone all out, he'd be dead or crippled. 6 apertures? Xiaohuahua stared at me, trembling. 1 aperture was a miracle, but 6? That wasn't a blessing. That was the heavens forcing success down my throat. I held out my hand. Give me the money. If we make a scene out of this, you're the one who's going to lose face. Xiaohuahua looked like he wanted to cry. Junior brother Lu Ren, it's not that I don't want to pay. The saintess took the fire spirit sword back. She gave me 20,000 coins and told me not to pay you. She actually told me to give you a beating instead. She took it back? I was stunned. That sword was a gift to him. She clearly wasn't happy he'd sold it to me. I walked over and helped the sobbing Xiaohuahua off the floor. I felt a bit guilty now. Senior brother, if my master took the sword back, you should have said so earlier. Why didn't you tell me? Xiaohuahua looked like he was about to spit blood from sheer frustration. You're blaming me for not telling you? Are you okay, though? I asked, trying to sound concerned. I'll be fine after a few days of rest, he grumbled, shaking his head. Good. Then I won't disturb you any longer. I hurried out of the room and shut the door. Behind me, I could hear Xiaohuahua finally break down and start wailing. He must have felt like the unluckiest man alive, getting caught between me and my master. Back at my dorm, I realized that in this world, your fist really is the only logic that matters. If I hadn't been stronger than Xiaohuahua, I never would have known the truth about the sword. My master probably hated me for selling her gift, but I couldn't worry about that now. I needed to focus on getting stronger. I gathered the 3 technique manuals I had borrowed and headed to the weapon pavilion. The elder in charge recognized me immediately. Lu Ren, he said. It's been a month. How is your training going? It's all right, I said, handing the books over. I'm here to return these. The elder sighed, assuming I had given up. To him, a scrap-grade student would need years just to scratch the surface of these weapons. I told you that you could keep them as long as you needed. Why give up so soon? I've been working very hard, I replied calmly. Between the tower and the real world, I had spent 82 years practicing. No one worked harder than me. You call this hard work? The elder snapped, getting angry. I only let you take these because of Elder Yun. You have no talent, and if you don't put in the effort, you'll be kicked out of the sect. But I've already mastered all three, I said simply, then turned and walked away. I didn't bother explaining that I had reached perfection in two of them and high mastery in the third. Let him think what he wanted. After I left, Elder Yun Qingyao walked into the pavilion. She was in a bad mood because of me and wanted to find some new sword scripts to distract herself. She had actually seen me leaving but avoided me, not wanting to deal with the headache. Elder Yun, the pavilion elder shouted, clearly fuming. That disciple of yours is hopeless. He finally gets a chance to be a warrior, and he returns his weapon manuals after only 1 month. He's lazy. Yun Qingyao froze. Only 1 month. She sighed deeply, feeling a pang of disappointment. She had hoped that if I worked hard, I might actually reach the Spirit Creek realm despite my bloodline. But with an attitude like that, I would never amount to anything. Back in my courtyard, I was already brainstorming new ways to make money. My plan to milk Xiaohuohuo for 88,000 coins a month was dead. I needed a new source of income to fund my time in the tower. If I could get another 25 years of cultivation time, I could probably push my movement techniques to perfection and open my 7th aperture. Most geniuses took 3 to 5 months to reach the Spirit Creek realm. I wanted to get there much faster. I knew I had to become an outer sect disciple soon. As an introductory disciple, I was always at risk of being kicked out of the sect if I didn't progress fast enough. Outer sect disciples had it much better. Even if their cultivation stalled, they could stay. But I had a problem. I was broke. To push my spirit cat steps to perfection, I needed money, a lot of it. We were talking hundreds of thousands of copper coins. I remembered reading in the Disciple Handbook that anyone who had opened 6 apertures could take on sect missions. These missions rewarded contribution points, which I could use to borrow high-grade martial arts manuals or buy cultivation resources. But there was a catch. Missions were dangerous for new disciples. Most beginners joined teams led by seniors to gain experience and a share of the loot. More importantly, I needed real combat. I had mastered 2 techniques and reached high mastery in a third, but without a real fight, that power was just theory. I headed across the Iron Chain Bridge toward the other peaks of the Qingyun sect. The outer area was split into 3 mountains, one for living quarters, one for the martial arts hall, and the third for the contribution hall. When I arrived at the plaza in front of the contribution hall, I saw crowds of disciples gathered in groups. Their auras were strong. These were the seasoned veterans. In one corner, a large circle of disciples had formed. In the center stood a girl with a striking figure, her green training robes hugging her curves. She was beautiful, but she looked bored. 2 young men stood beside her, looking incredibly excited. "Senior Sister Chiyu, pick me. I promise to stay out of the way and just cheer you on," one guy shouted. "Pick me. You know my talent. I'm basically a walking corpse," another yelled. I squeezed through the crowd, confused by the shouting match. I tapped a nearby senior on the shoulder and asked who she was. He looked at me like I was an idiot. "You're new, aren't you? That's Chiyu. She's the top-ranked genius among the introductory disciples. If she's a genius, why hasn't she moved up to the outer sect yet?" I asked. The senior's eyes filled with worship. She could have broken through a long time ago. She's staying back because she wants to break her limits and open an 8th spiritual aperture. My jaw dropped. I thought the human body only had 7 apertures. She's taking 3 weak disciples on a mission to sharpen her own combat skills, the senior explained. She's already found 2. She only needs 1 more. Why pick weak ones? I asked. Because missions require a 4-person team. If she takes strong teammates, there's no challenge for her. She wants to do all the work herself. He chuckled. It's basically a contest to see who is the most useless. The more pathetic you are, the more she likes you. I was on her team 6 months ago. I did nothing but pick up loot, and I walked away with 50,000 coins. I looked at the 2 guys already on her team. Are they really that bad? Beyond bad, the senior whispered. They both have grade 4 bloodlines, but they're lazy. They've been here a year and only opened 2 apertures. Everyone calls them the twin scraps of Qingyun sect. Chiyu stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise. I want a genuine loser. If any of you think you can compete with these two, step up. The crowd went silent. How could anyone be more useless than the twin scraps? Then, a shifty-looking guy with a rat-like face stepped out. I've opened 3 apertures, one more than them, but I've only practiced a single low-grade martial art, and I barely even know it. Chi-Yu looked unimpressed. You've been here a year and only know one low-grade technique? Cultivation is too hard, the guy bragged. If my dad hadn't begged the elders to let me stay, I'd be home inheriting the family fortune. I just want to bask in your glory, senior sister. The crowd groaned. Damn it, I should have practiced less, someone muttered. It was a dream job, getting paid a fortune just to watch a genius fight. The rat-faced guy smirked, looking around triumphantly. Well, it looks like the last spot is me. I'll take that spot, I said, stepping into the center of the circle. The crowd stared at me. I was a fresh face. The rat-faced guy glared. You're a new disciple. You just started. How could you possibly be more useless than me? I smiled. Does being useless require practice? If you really think your one low-grade technique makes you a loser, you've got no idea. I've been failing for a year, the guy barked. I'm a total waste of space. I let out a short, mocking laugh. I have a scrap-grade bloodline. Can you top that? The plaza went dead silent. Scrap-grade? You're Lin Yuan? The one the Saintess took as a disciple. The guy's face twisted in shock. The whispers exploded instantly. Everyone had heard of the legendary loser who had lucked his way into a master's favor. Compared to a scrap-grade bloodline, the twin scraps looked like geniuses. You couldn't get lower than me. Chi-Yu looked at me, her eyes filled with blatant contempt. She wanted losers to make her training harder, but looking at my confident smile, she clearly thought I was the most pathetic person she had ever met. Fine, she said coldly. You're in. I didn't care that the other disciples looked down on me. To them, joining Chi-Yu's team for protection was a badge of shame, but to me, it was the perfect cover. The last spot is yours, Chi-Yu said coldly. Thank you, senior sister, I replied with a quick bow. I was new here and didn't know the terrain. Joining her team was the smartest way to get some real-world experience without drawing too much attention to my actual strength. We meet at the mountain gate at dawn, she added, turning on her heel and leaving without another word. As soon as she was gone, Wang Tung and Zhang Sheng, the legendary twin scraps, approached me. Wang Tung was grinning like he'd just won the lottery. I'm finally free. I'm not part of the twin scraps anymore. Zhang Sheng snorted. Don't get ahead of yourself. If you want to drop that title, you have to prove you're better than me first. Fine. Let's settle it right now. Wang Tung barked, rolling up his sleeves. Before I knew it, the two of them were rolling around on the ground, brawling like children. The surrounding disciples watched in stunned silence. The balance of the sect had been broken. Now that a scrap-grade loser like me had arrived, the former bottom feeders were fighting over who got to be second to last. While I prepared for the trip, news of my laziness reached the inner sect elders' hall. The great elder pulled my master, Yun Qingyao, aside. How is Lin Yuan's progress? He asked. Yun Qingyao looked uneasy. It's going well. Is it? The great elder frowned. I heard from the library elder that after he opened his aperture, he didn't pick any high-level techniques. He took 3 low-level ones and returned them after only a month. Is that true? Yun Qingyao bit her lip, trying to defend me. My disciple works hard, but his talent is just too low. He couldn't even reach the entry level for those techniques, so he gave up. The great elder sighed. I didn't realize a scrap-grade bloodline was this hopeless. There are only 2 weeks left until the exchange with the Yellow Dao sect. Can you really get him to open 7 apertures by then? I've created a high-level sword technique, she insisted, her voice desperate. I'll teach him personally. No matter how weak he is, I will make him learn it. I don't expect him to win, the great elder said solemnly. I just want the world to see that our Qingyun sect can actually train a scrap-grade student. Don't let the sect leader down. After he left, Yun Qingyao stood alone, feeling a wave of guilt. She assumed I had given up on myself because of my poor talent. She decided she had to be the light in my darkness, and rushed to my courtyard to find me. But the house was empty. She ran into Xiao Huahua outside. Where is Lin Yuan? She demanded. He joined senior sister Chi-Yu's team, Xiao Huahua reported. He's heading out on a mission with the twin scraps. Yun Qingyao's face went pale. She knew Chi-Yu's reputation. Chi-Yu only took trash teammates so she could do all the fighting herself to sharpen her skills. He's joining the twin scraps to be a glorified spectator, she whispered, her temper flaring. Having a bad bloodline is one thing, but where is his pride? How can I take him to the exchange ceremony now? Unaware of my master's breakdown, I had already traveled half a day with the team. We arrived at Black Fox Town, a bustling hub located right at the edge of the Black Fox Ridge. The air was thick with the smell of herbs and the shouts of street vendors. Shadow Cat cores, essential for talismans, 10,000 copper coins each. Spirit grass, 8,000 a stalk, 6 grand if you buy 10. I looked around, fascinated. This was the real martial world. I had read about the monsters in the ridge. Most were grade 1 beasts, perfect for Aperture Realm cultivators. Killing a single shadow cat could net a person 10,000 coins, a fortune for a commoner, but just a day's work for a cultivator. Chi-Yu, I didn't expect to see you here. A group of 4 blocked our path. The leader was a teenager around 18 wearing flashy, expensive robes. He looked at us with pure disgust, his eyes lingering on me for a second too long. Let's team up, he suggested. No, Chi-Yu said, trying to walk past him. The boy's face twisted in anger. Don't be like that. You're going to be my woman eventually, Ding Hai's woman. I leaned toward Wang Tung as we followed Chi-Yu away. Who's that jerk? Ding Hai, Wang Tung whispered back. He's an outer disciple from the Yellow Dao sect. He's opened 6 apertures. His family is from the same town as Chi-Yu's, and they've been trying to force a marriage between them because of her talent. Wang Tung spat on the ground. He thinks he's so great. None of us are worse than him. Don't include me in that, I said, waving my hand. Don't look down on yourself, junior brother, Wang Tung said, trying to be encouraging. You're the saintess's only disciple. That makes you royalty among us losers. If you two don't shut up and focus, you can go back to the sect right now, Chi-Yu snapped. Wang Tung and Zhang Sheng immediately went quiet, though they still looked incredibly relaxed. They weren't here to train, they were here for a vacation. Relax, Lin Yuan, Zhang Sheng said, leaning back with his hands behind his head. With senior sister Chi-Yu here, we're perfectly safe. I just nodded, keeping my eyes on the dark tree line ahead. I wasn't here for safety. I was here for the kill. A massive tiger, its hide as hard as granite, burst from the undergrowth. It snarled at us, blood still dripping from its jagged fangs. My stomach churned when I saw what it was chewing on, a severed human arm. Its pale, milky eyes locked onto the 4 of us with a terrifying, primal hunger. It's a granite tiger, I blurted out. I remembered this from the bestiary for disciples. It was a high-level rank 1 beast. Its skin was like stone, giving it incredible defense. Its strength was supposedly equal to a martial artist with 7 spiritual apertures. Even then, most people with 7 apertures wouldn't dare face one head-on. It's just a granite tiger, Lin Yuan. Don't lose your head, Wang Tung said, patting my shoulder to calm me down. I couldn't help it. This was the first time I had faced a real spirit beast since coming to this world. It was 10 times more ferocious than any wild animal I'd ever seen. The tiger let out a bone-chilling roar and lunged straight for Chi-Yu. Its claws tore through the air with a whistling sound, aiming right for her shoulder. The power behind the strike was immense. Chi-Yu didn't panic. She shifted her weight, sliding her foot to the side and tilting her body just enough to let the beast sail past. The tiger missed and slammed into an ancient tree behind her, snapping the thick trunk like a dry twig. Before the beast could recover, Chi-Yu moved. Her feet danced like a butterfly through flowers as she closed the distance. Humph. She threw a punch. It looked soft, almost delicate, but it carried a terrifying, explosive force. It slammed into the tiger's underbelly, punching a hole straight through its granite-like hide. The tiger let out a pained shriek and crashed to the ground. It struggled for a few seconds, legs twitching, before going completely still. Blood pooled rapidly from the massive wound in its gut. What a punch! And that movement! I whispered, genuinely impressed. Senior sister Chi-Yu has mastered the high human grade Vajra fist and the mid-human grade Star Shadow step, Wang Tung said casually. She's incredible. Though, honestly, if I were alone, I could probably take one of these down too. I stayed quiet, calculating. If my apertures were fully opened, I could probably hold my own against her. But for this mission, it was clear she wasn't going to give us much of a chance to fight. That was fine by me. I was here to observe and learn how these beasts moved. Wang Tung rushed over to the carcass with a dagger. He dug into the tiger's skull and pulled out a stone-like crystal the size of a fist. A monster core, he grinned. This will sell for at least 10,000 copper coins. We haven't done a thing, and we've already earned 2,500 each. Chiyu wiped her hands and looked toward the deeper woods. Our main goal is a rank 2 spirit herb in the outer reaches of Black Fox Ridge. We'll run into more rank 1 beasts, but as long as you stay behind me, you'll be safe. Let's move. Over the next 3 days, we pushed deeper. We encountered quick-wind wolves, Vajra apes, and more. None of them lasted more than 3 moves against Chiyu. By the 4th day, we had killed nearly 20 beasts. Finally, under the shade of a massive ancient tree, Chiyu stopped. There it was, a glowing green herb shaped like a small lantern, emitting a faint, sweet fragrance. Found it, Chiyu said, her eyes bright with excitement. The 100 aperture grass. With this, I can finally open my 8th spiritual aperture. She reached out and plucked it. But as soon as her fingers touched the stem, her expression crumbled. A dark green vein of poison began spreading rapidly across her palm. How can 100 aperture grass be poisonous? She gasped, her face turning pale. Senior sister, what's wrong? I asked, stepping forward. I've been poisoned. She gritted her teeth, trying to circulate her chi to flush it out. But the more she pushed, the faster the toxin spread. Because I put it there, of course. A mocking voice echoed through the trees. 4 figures stepped out from the shadows. It was Ding Hai and his group. He walked toward Chiyu with a disgusting, predatory smirk. I knew you were coming to the ridge for that herb, Chiyu. I just rubbed a little something on the leaves. Don't worry, it won't kill you. It just makes you completely powerless. Our faces went white. Wang Tung rushed forward, pointing a finger at Ding Hai. You cowardly snake. You actually used poison? You. Slap. Before Wang Tung could finish, Ding Hai's hand blurred. A heavy blow sent Wang Tung spinning to the ground. Ding Hai spat on him. If I remember correctly, you're one of the 2 trash disciples of the Qingyun sect. You think you can bark at me? I could kill you right now. Chiyu drew a thin, flexible sword from her waist, her hand trembling. Ding Hai, leave now. Don't make me do something I'll regret. You're poisoned and weak, Chiyu. How are you going to stop me? Ding Hai laughed, his eyes roaming over her body. Actually, I'm the one who's going to do something you'll regret. What do you want? Chiyu's voice shook. She could feel her strength draining away. Simple. I'm going to make sure we seal the deal right here. Once we've spent the night together, your family will have no choice but to accept my marriage proposal. It'll be a done deal. Ding Hai lunged forward and grabbed Chiyu's arm, dragging her toward the thickets. She struggled, but she was like a doll in his grip, her eyes filling with terror and despair. Suddenly, a shadow flickered. A hand reached out and clamped onto Ding Hai's wrist like a vice. I looked him dead in the eye and smiled. If anyone's sealing a deal here, it's going to be me. Who gave you permission to touch her? What did you say? Ding Hai blinked, stunned for a second before his face twisted in rage. Lin Yuan, run. Chiyu cried out. He's opened 6 apertures. He can strike with 6,000 pounds of force. You only have 1. He'll kill you. Run? It's too late for that, Ding Hai snarled. He swung a massive palm strike toward my chest. His hand glowed with spiritual energy, the force of the blow causing the air to crackle and pop. It was the Great River Palm, a brutal, heavy technique. Against a normal 1-aperture disciple, this would have shattered every bone in their body. Chiyu closed her eyes, unable to watch. Ding Hai grinned, pouring all his energy into the strike, intending to end my life in 1 hit. I didn't dodge. I didn't flinch. I just chuckled. The moment my fist collided with Ding Hai's palm, the spiritual energy from the 6 apertures inside my body surged. It felt like a dam breaking, all that power funneling directly into my knuckles. There was a deafening thud. Everyone watched in silence as Ding Hai was hit like he'd been struck by a bolt of lightning. He stumbled back, his boots dragging through the dirt for a dozen steps before he finally jerked to a halt. How is this possible? Ding Hai gasped, staring at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. He knew Chi-Yu's usual team. He recognized Wang Teng and Zhang Sheng. They were the famous trash duo of the Qinyan sect. Since I was with them, he'd assumed I was just another weakling. But that exchange told him a different story. He felt my strength. It wasn't weaker than his at all. To him, it felt like I had opened at least 6 apertures. Behind me, Chi-Yu, Wang Teng, and Zhang Sheng were even more shocked. They knew I had a scrap-grade bloodline. They thought I'd only opened my first aperture because of a lucky pill from the sect master. This level of power didn't make sense for a 1-aperture cultivator. I didn't give them time to think. I bridged the gap in a single stride, lunging straight for Ding Hai. Storm Palm. Ding Hai roared, his face twisting with malice. He unleashed a flurry of strikes, his hands moving with fluid, violent speed. It was like a hurricane of blows designed to overwhelm me, leaving no room to breathe or react. I didn't flinch. I shifted my weight, my hands tracing the circular patterns of the bagua. My arms moved like a heavy grindstone, steady and unbreakable. No matter how fierce his storm was, my defense held firm. I parried every single strike with ease. What? Ding Hai's eyes bulged. He couldn't believe his mid-grade technique was being neutralized so casually. Before he could pull back, I changed my rhythm. I lunged forward like a tiger descending a mountain and buried my fist deep into his chest. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the woods. Ding Hai flew backward like a kite with a broken string. He slammed into a thick tree trunk with a sickening crack and slumped to the ground, coughing up mouthfuls of bright red blood. The other 3 disciples from the Huangdao sect stood frozen. Their strongest fighter, a 6-aperture expert, had been dismantled in seconds. All of you together, Ding Hai shrieked, clutching his chest. Kill him. The 3 disciples snapped out of it. Like Ding Hai, they had all opened 6 apertures. Individually, they were weaker, but together, even a 7-aperture warrior would struggle to survive their combined assault. They bared their teeth and pounced. Heavenly Wolf Claw. Threw-back punch. Iron Mountain Palm. They unleashed their sect's mid-grade martial arts from 3 different directions, locking down every possible escape route. They were aiming for the kill. I remained calm. I leaned into my bagua stance, my movements becoming a blur of circular energy. I was the center of the formation. Every claw, punch, and palm that came near me was deflected and redirected. After a dozen exchanges, I saw my opening. I shifted from palm to fist and struck 3 times in the blink of an eye. Thud, thud, thud. All 3 of them caught a heavy punch to the sternum. They sprayed blood and collapsed, rolling on the ground and howling in agony. Bagua palm. Ding Hai whispered, his voice trembling with terror. He recognized the technique. It was a low-grade defensive move. How can a low-grade move block 3 mid-grade attacks? Who the hell are you? He wasn't the only one wondering. Chi-Yu, Wang Teng, and Zhang Sheng were staring at me like I was a monster. Chi-Yu realized something even more shocking. I hadn't just learned the tiger punch and bagua palm. I had mastered them to the great circle perfection stage. That didn't just take talent. It took years of dedicated practice. How had I done it in 2 months? Kid, I'll let you go, Ding Hai said, trying to sound intimidating despite the blood on his chin. This is between me and Chi-Yu. Don't get involved. You can't afford to offend the Ding family. I didn't say a word. I walked over and planted my foot firmly on his chest. Crack. His ribs shattered instantly. Blood sprayed as the life left his eyes. He was dead before he could even let out a final gasp. I turned toward the other 3. They were shaking, their faces pale with horror. He killed senior brother Ding. He actually killed him, one of them stammered. They never expected me to be this decisive. Seeing me walk toward them with cold eyes, they scrambled onto their knees and started begging for their lives. I didn't listen. 3 swift kicks sent them flying. They hit the ground and went still. Wang Teng and Zhang Sheng looked like they wanted to throw up. In the sect, we heard about disciples killing each other, but seeing it happen right in front of them was different. It was brutal. It was real. Chi-Yu was different. She had seen blood before. She knew that if I hadn't killed them, she would have done it herself. I knelt by Ding Hai's body, searched his pockets, and found a small vial. I tossed it to Chi-Yu. Sister, this should be the antidote. Thanks, she whispered, her voice weak but filled with genuine gratitude. I nodded and helped Wang Ting up. You okay? I'm definitely not okay. Wang Tung complained, nursing his swollen face. You're this strong, and you waited that long to step in? My handsome face is ruined. We need to move, Chi Yu said, the medicine already starting to work. We hiked for another half hour until we reached an open clearing. Chi Yu sat under an ancient tree and finally let out a long, shaky breath. She looked at me, her eyes full of complicated emotions. To kill 4 6-aperture cultivators alone, it was a terrifying display of combat power. She had 6 apertures too, but she wasn't sure she could have done it that easily. Junior brother Len, I owe you my life, Chi Yu said seriously. I just smiled faintly. Since coming to this world, I had learned the hard way. Being kind to your enemies is being cruel to yourself. Leaving Ding Hai alive would have only brought endless trouble. About what happened to Ding Hai, keep it a secret, Chi Yu told the others. If his family investigates, I'll take the blame. I'll say I did it. It has nothing to do with Lin Yuan. Don't worry, sister, Wang Tung said, patting his chest. That guy deserved to die? We didn't see a thing. Exactly, Zhang Xing added. I didn't argue. Besides, even if the Ding family did investigate, who would ever believe that a scrap-grade disciple like me could take down 4 of their best? The Ding family wouldn't suspect a thing. Black Fox Ridge was a graveyard for disciples. Every year, countless people vanished here without a trace, their bodies lost to the shadows. Qin Yu looked at me, her curiosity finally boiling over. She asked the question that had been eating at her. She wanted to know how I had mastered both Tiger Fist and 8 trigrams palm to the point of perfection. I just laughed it off. I told her I had received a blessing from an immortal in my dreams when I was a child. I claimed the techniques just clicked for me recently. She didn't buy it for a second. With a scrap-grade bloodline, no amount of training should have produced these results. But she was smart enough not to pry. Everyone had their secrets. Once her energy fully returned, she stood up. She had already gathered the 100-aperture grass we came for. It was time to leave this place. On the way back, we ran into several Tier 1 demonic beasts. I told Qin Yu to stay back. I wanted to handle this myself. Killing men was one thing, but fighting monsters was a different kind of rush. My combat instincts sharpened with every kill. By the time I had taken down a dozen beasts, my power felt twice as strong as when I entered the woods. I was currently locked in a struggle with a massive green-scaled python. Wang Tung and Zhang Sheng watched from a distance, but Qin Yu stood apart from them. Wang Tung nudged Zhang Sheng, pointing toward our senior sister. He noticed the way she was looking at me. Her usual cold gaze had softened into a faint smile. They whispered that she was falling for me because I'd saved her life. I didn't have time to worry about her heart. I had a snake to kill. Just as I finished the python, a sudden chill ran down my spine. Junior brother, watch out, Qin Yu screamed. A high-pressure jet of water shot toward my back. I reacted on instinct, flipping through the air and performing 3 backflips to clear the area. The water projectile missed me but tore straight through a massive tree nearby, leaving a clean hole in the trunk. A terrifying, rank scent filled the air. A massive serpent, thick as a water barrel and 30 feet long, slithered out from the brush. Its body was covered in emerald scales the size of dinner plates. Most terrifying of all was the single horn growing from its head. It roared, its eyes fixed on me with pure, murderous hatred. It's the green-scaled Snake King. Wang Tung stammered, his face turning pale. Zhang Sheng was paralyzed. This was a Tier 1 king. Even a warrior at the first level of the Spirit Brook realm would turn tail and run from this thing. I realized I must have killed its offspring, and now the parent wanted blood. Qin Yu's face didn't show fear, but excitement. She pointed at the horn. The snake was evolving into a Jiao, a lesser dragon. That only happened if the beast had consumed a rare natural treasure. She suggested we team up to kill it and split the treasure 50-50. A natural treasure? My blood pumped with excitement. Something like that could skyrocket my cultivation or fetch a massive price at the market. You two get to safety, Qin Yu shouted to the guys. The battle started instantly. The Snake King lunged, its tail slamming down like a steel whip. It missed Qin Yu, shattering the ground where she had stood moments before. She drew a flexible, snow-white sword from her waist and lashed out at the beast's head. The metal clanged against the scales like hammer on anvil. The monster roared, spitting a dozen water arrows at her. She danced away, struggling to get close enough to deal a real blow. "Sister, I'll distract it," I shouted. I activated all 6 of my spiritual apertures at once. I leaped high into the air, landing right on the monster's skull. I put every ounce of my strength into a tiger fist. The impact exploded with 10,000 pounds of force, slamming the Snake King's head into the dirt. I didn't stop. I rained down punch after punch, the sheer force of my blows rocking the massive creature's entire body. The beast grew furious. It turned its attention away from Yu and unleashed a barrage of water arrows directly at me. I didn't flinch. I moved like a shadow, using the spirit cat steps to weave through the projectiles. Yu watched me, completely stunned. Mastering 2 fist techniques was already impossible, but I had reached great success in a movement technique too. Those were notoriously hard to learn. Even a genius with a 6th grade bloodline would need months to reach that level. I had been in the sect for less than 8 weeks. She snapped out of her shock quickly. She couldn't let this opportunity slide. She lunged forward, her sword moving like a blur in her pear blossom sword style. A rain of sword light descended on the beast, covering its massive body. We fought as a team, a whirlwind of blades and fists against the thrashing serpent. Even with only 6 apertures, my speed and technique allowed me to hold my ground. From the sidelines, Wang Tung and Zhang Sheng were speechless. They wondered if the testing stone had been broken when I was evaluated. Even Yu hadn't been this strong a year ago. We were supposed to be the 3 scraps, but it turned out I was a monster in disguise. Under our combined assault, the Snake King finally began to buckle. Emerald scales flew into the air as we drove it back, inch by bloody inch. Thick crimson blood sprayed from the serpent's wounds, soaking the earth. Aside from a few tears in our clothes, Yu and I were mostly unscathed. My adrenaline was redlining. This was my first real life-and-death struggle with a beast, and instead of fear, I felt a surging battle intent. I wanted more. The green-scaled Serpent King roared, a sound like a primeval beast that shook the very air. Its demonic chi flared, swirling around its body in a violent vortex as it lunged at us. The collision was deafening. The sheer force of the impact tore the air apart and blasted a crater several feet deep into the ground. Both Yu and I were sent flying back nearly 30 feet. The beast roared again, but this time, something was different. A strange, bloody light began to shimmer on its neck. Its emerald scales started shifting, hardening, and transforming into something that looked like dragon scales right before our eyes. Its aura was skyrocketing. Not good. Yu's face went pale. It's completing its evolution. "Senior sister," I shouted, bracing myself. "There's something glowing under its head. I'll distract it. We have to end this now." If this Tier 1 beast finished its transformation, it would become a Tier 2 monster, comparable to a warrior in the Spirit Creek realm. If that happened, we wouldn't just fail to kill it, we'd likely leave our lives here. I bolted forward like an arrow released from a bow. The Serpent King, its power now surging, opened its massive maw. It didn't just fire one water arrow, it unleashed a barrage that moved like streaks of lightning. The speed and power were on a completely different level than before. I pushed my spirit cat steps to the absolute limit, weaving through the deadly projectiles. Even though I dodged the direct hits, the stray droplets that struck my skin felt like burning lead. I gritted my teeth. If I had reached Grandmaster rank in this movement technique, I could have danced through this without a scratch. I was still too weak. "Die!" Yu screamed. While I drew the beast's fire, she leaped high into the air. Her sword found a gap in the scales and plunged deep into the serpent's belly. The beast let out a harrowing cry of agony. As she ripped her blade out, a brilliant flash of red light erupted from the wound. A palm-sized piece of jade, glowing like a trapped flame, flew out and thudded onto the grass. The moment that jade left its body, the Serpent King's aura withered. It collapsed, its fighting spirit completely extinguished. I didn't give it a second chance. I rushed in and unleashed my great tiger punch, raining a dozen blows onto its skull until the bone shattered. The massive body hit the dirt with a heavy thud. In the distance, Wang Tung and Zhang Sheng stood frozen, their eyes wide with horror and awe. I had actually beaten a serpent king to death with my bare hands. Chinyu didn't look at the corpse. She walked straight to the glowing object and picked it up. She turned to me, her eyes shining. Lu Run, this is Tawasha Bloodjade. Your big break is finally here. Bloodjade, what is that? I asked, wiping the sweat from my brow. Wang Tung and Zhang Sheng hurried over, their shock turning into excitement. So that's why it was evolving, Wang Tung muttered. I can't believe there was Bloodjade in Black Fox Ridge. Junior brother, your scrap-grade bloodline actually has a use now. I was lost. Will someone tell me what this thing is? It's a key, Chinyu explained, her voice trembling with excitement. It opens the Tawasha cave dwelling. Only warriors with a 4th-grade bloodline or lower can enter. It's the only place where someone can inherit the legacy of the Tawasha ancient emperor. She looked me dead in the eyes. Lu Run, as long as you don't break through to the Spirit Creek realm in the next 3 months, you have a chance to get that inheritance. It could fix your bloodline talent forever. I was stunned. Who was this Tawasha guy? How can he fix a bloodline? Chinyu smiled. Legend says the Tawasha ancient emperor was born with a 2nd-grade bloodline, barely enough to even be a warrior. But he defied the heavens and became one of the strongest emperors on the continent. Nobody knows how he died, but he clearly had a secret that allowed him to surpass his talent. If you find that secret, you could become a legend too. She told me more about the cave. It had been in the Jianyun kingdom for 1,000 years. Every year, people found these jades, but only the trash talents could enter. Ironically, the geniuses were locked out. Over the centuries, the people who made it the furthest were always those with the lowest grades. I was a scrap grade, even lower than the emperor himself. This wasn't just an opportunity, it was a path designed specifically for someone like me. With my mysterious time-dilated tower and this inheritance, I wouldn't just catch up to the geniuses. I would leave them in the dust. I'm going, I said, clutching the jade. In 3 months, I'll be at that cave. Chinyu handed me the jade and signaled to the others. Wang Tung, clean up the battlefield. Let's get out of here. We stripped the serpent of its valuable parts, the horn, the scales, and the core. Along with the 100 aperture grass Chinyu had gathered and the other monster cores we'd collected, our haul was massive. Back at Black Fox Town, we headed straight to a shop called Spirit Treasure Pavilion. It was a dusty place that bought anything scavenged from the ridge. Shopkeeper, we've got materials to sell, Wang Tung announced, dropping a heavy leather bag on the counter. The old man behind the desk peered at us over his spectacles. Disciples from the Qinyan sect? Let's see what you've got. Wang Tung dumped the contents out. When the Serpent King's horn and scales hit the table, the old man's jaw dropped. A green-scaled Serpent King? This is a Tier 2 beast. How did the 4 of you kill this thing? Just a snake, Wang Tung bragged, though his face was still bruised. Just give us the cash. The shopkeeper did some quick math. For everything, I can give you 480,000 copper coins. Do you accept? Wang Tung nodded eagerly. The old man produced 48 stacks of bills. 12,000 each, Wang Tung said, handing me my share with a grin. I guess getting slapped around was worth it after all. I looked at the thick stack of money in my hand. For a scrap disciple who had nothing yesterday, this was a fortune. But looking at the blood jade tucked in my shirt, I knew the real wealth was yet to come. Our trip to Black Fox Ridge lasted 7 days. By the end of it, each of us had earned 120,000 copper coins. Before this, I couldn't have imagined seeing that much money in my life. On the way back, I pulled Chinyu aside. I told her the Tawasha blood jade was something we found together, so I owed her a favor. Her beautiful face clouded with a bit of annoyance. She asked if we really needed to be that formal, especially since I had saved her life. I just nodded and didn't push it further. Half a day later, we reached the sect gates. Chinyu turned to me with a small smile, saying we should do missions together again when there was a chance. Then she turned and walked away, her waist swaying as she went. Wang Tung and Zhang Sheng said their goodbyes and headed off too. I didn't go straight back to my room. Instead, I took my stack of coins to the supply hall and bought 2,400 pounds of spiritual rice. Back at my courtyard, I washed the grime off my body and changed into clean clothes. I locked my door tight and entered the tower space. I looked at the mountain of rice. This was enough to fuel my training for 33 years in here. I was determined to master the spirit cat steps. During the hunt, I realized my movement techniques were my biggest weakness. Movement skills are the hardest to master, and most warriors stop once they reach the great success stage. But I had all the time in the world. 13 years passed in the blink of an eye inside the void. I moved through the space with the lightness of a cat, jumping and darting so fast that I left afterimages behind me. A normal person wouldn't even be able to track me with their eyes. I finally stopped and took a deep breath, a smile spreading across my face. The spirit cat steps were finally at the perfection stage. Even better, I had opened the spiritual aperture in my brain. All 7 apertures were now fully open. I still had enough rice to last another 20 years. I had been at the Qingyun sect for less than 2 months, yet I had already reached 7 apertures. Even a grade 6 genius would find that hard to believe. But I wasn't ready to break through to the spirit stream realm just yet. The Tawasha Grotto was opening in 3 months, and only those in the aperture realm could enter. I wanted to push myself further and try to open an 8th aperture to make up for my poor natural talent. I needed to ask my master if she knew how to do it. I left the tower space and stepped out of my room, only to see Yun Qingyao flying toward my courtyard. She landed right at my gate. She looked thin and fragile, but her eyes were full of resentment. She looked at me like a neglected wife complaining to her husband. She asked if I was unhappy with her as a master. I was completely confused. She grew angrier as she spoke. She reminded me that she had made an exception to take me in because she thought I was serious about martial arts. She asked me what I had been doing. I thought she was mad about the sword, so I asked if it was because I sold the fire spirit sword. She snapped back that the sword didn't matter. She was furious that I had borrowed 3 techniques and returned them after only a month. She told me the ancient Tawasha spent 3 years just to master 1 low-grade technique. She thought I was wasting my life, playing around with Qin Yu's team instead of training. Hearing her scold me actually made my heart feel warm. My eyes even got a little wet. I realized she had been watching over me in secret this whole time. It was the first time I felt a real connection to someone in this world. I took a deep breath and told her I had been working hard. I told her I had already opened 7 apertures. She didn't believe a word of it. She sighed, saying she shouldn't have taken me in because my scrap bloodline made cultivation too difficult. She told me to follow her inside. I followed her into the living room and bowed low. I begged her not to kick me out, telling her she was the only family I had left in this world. When she asked about my parents, I told her the truth, that I was an orphan who grew up in the nursery. She looked at me with pity. She wasn't going to expel me. She had news. In 7 days, the Huangdao sect was bringing 3 geniuses to our sect to exchange pointers. One of them was a grade 6 talent who had already opened 7 apertures. She said we were guaranteed to lose. The sect leaders wanted her to train me, so I could at least survive a move or 2 and save some face for the school. I looked her in the eye and told her I would defeat that genius. She just shook her head, thinking I was talking nonsense. She told me she would spend the next 7 days teaching me a sword technique she had created herself. My eyes lit up. My current skills were all for close-quarters combat. A sword technique would change everything. She called it the Celestial Vision Sword. She had created it by watching the heavens. It only had 3 moves, but if I could master them, it would be as powerful as a high-grade human technique. She pulled out her sword and stepped into the courtyard. Even though she looked weak, every strike she made was sharp enough to pierce through anything. She shouted the name of the first move, Jidong. Her sword moved faster and faster, light and free. The blade swept through the air like a silver snake, slicing through falling leaves with a grace that left me stunned. She performed the move over and over. Then she showed me the second move, Busan, and the third, Leidong. She repeated them dozens of times, making sure I saw every detail before she finally pulled back her blade. Yun Qingyao tossed the fire spirit sword to me. Her expression was dead serious. From this day forward, she was going to be my shadow. For the next 7 days, we would live together, eat together, and train together. She wasn't going to let me slack off for even a second. She believed that with her personal guidance, even someone with my bottom-tier talent could at least master the first form. If I could do that, and maybe open another aperture or 2, I might survive a couple of moves against the Huangdao sect disciples. My mind started to wander at the thought of living together, but Yun Qingyao's face turned bright red. She snapped at me, telling me not to get any ideas. She was taking the bed, and I was sleeping on the floor. I was stunned. This was my room, yet the owner was being relegated to the floor? I worried about catching a cold with my weak cultivation, but she didn't give me a choice. She marched me outside to begin. I gripped the fire spirit sword, but I stood there like a statue. The truth was, I had already forgotten almost every move she showed me earlier. My natural talent was just that bad. She crossed her arms, frowning, and asked why I wasn't moving. I gave her a bitter smile and admitted that the techniques had already slipped my mind. She looked shocked, but she didn't give up. She took the sword back and demonstrated the first move, Jidong, over 20 times. She moved slowly, making sure I saw every transition. I watched with everything I had. My brain understood the moves, but my hands refused to follow. I just stood there, looking stupid. She asked if I had it yet, and I simply shook my head. I told her I had underestimated how useless a scrap-grade bloodline really was. She didn't get angry. Instead, she walked up behind me and grabbed my wrists. She told me to feel the movement. As she guided my arms, her hands felt cool against my skin, but my heart felt warm. I focused entirely, memorizing the flow of the sword as our bodies moved as one. In that moment, we looked like a pair of cultivation partners practicing in perfect harmony. Xiaohuahua happened to walk by right then and froze. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. He couldn't understand why the holy maiden, who seemed so disappointed in me before, was now being so intimate. He didn't want to see any more of this. He turned around and left immediately, planning to beg the elders for a different courtyard just to get away from me. For the next few days, our routine was grueling. Yun Qingyao woke me up at the crack of dawn. We ate every meal together in the main dining hall, which drew stares from every disciple in the sect. Word spread fast that the holy maiden was personally coaching the scrap-grade loser for the upcoming exchange. Most of them laughed. They figured that even with one aperture open, someone like me couldn't possibly learn a real sword technique. Yun Qingyao heard the whispers. She looked at me solemnly and told me to prove them wrong. I nodded, promising to work hard. I knew the celestial vision sword was a high-grade technique. Without her help, someone with my talent would never master it in a lifetime. After 3 days of her literal hand-holding, I could finally perform the 3 moves, but they were stiff and awkward. I saw the guilt in her eyes. She knew my talent was bad, but she hadn't realized it was this hopeless. She looked at me and sighed, thinking that even a legendary figure couldn't fix a bloodline this week. She eventually told me to stop. She gave up on the complex moves and told me to just practice the basics: chop, hack, stab, and parry. She hoped that by cramming the basics, I could at least save a tiny bit of face for the sect. By the end of the 4th day, I had mastered the basic strikes. My movements were heavy and had some power behind them. Yun Qingyao handed the fire spirit sword back to me for keeps. She patted my shoulder and told me that no matter what happened in the future, I would always be her disciple. She told me to rest and just do my best the next day. As I watched her walk away, I whispered to myself that I would make her proud. She didn't believe I had 7 apertures yet, so I would have to show her during the ceremony. I went back to my room and entered the tower space. I had enough spiritual rice to last me 20 years in here. If I wanted to beat a grade 6 talent, the basics wouldn't be enough. I had seen how strong people like Qinyu were. I needed the real technique. I spent the first entire year in the tower doing nothing but those 4 basic moves: chop, hack, stab, parry, millions of times. Eventually, my swings carried a terrifying momentum. I tested a strike on a massive boulder, and the blade sliced through it like it was soft tofu. Once the basics were etched into my soul, I moved back to the first move of the celestial vision sword, Jidong. It took 7 years. 7 years of mind-numbing repetition inside the tower while only hours passed outside. My movements became fluid, then fast, then lightning quick. Finally, I lunged, my sword flickering like a silver snake, and punched a clean hole straight through a solid rock. I pulled back and exhaled. It had taken nearly a decade of my life, but I had finally mastered the first form of a high-grade human technique. My talent was still trash, but in this tower, time was the one thing I had plenty of. By all accounts, mastering the next move should have been impossible for me. Most people would spend a decade just trying to grasp the first form, but maybe it was because my master, Yin Yao, had taught me personally that I felt a spark of hope. I took a deep breath and dove back into my training. The second move was called unyielding. I swung my sword again and again. At first, my movements were clunky and awkward, but as the years bled into each other, the rhythm took hold. 12 years passed inside the silent void of the tower space. Now, when I swung my blade, the light didn't just flicker, it flowed like drifting clouds. Then, in a heartbeat, that flow would contract into a single, terrifying point of pressure. I lunged. My sword pierced a massive boulder, leaving a clean, dark hole. A split second later, the air around the rock groaned and exploded. The entire boulder shattered into tiny fragments, raining down around me. I had done it. I had mastered the second form. 20 years of bitter cultivation inside the tower had yielded more than I ever expected. I wiped the sweat from my brow and exited the space, returning to the real world. My body felt heavy with the weight of decades, but my mind was sharp. I headed to the dining hall for dinner. The room was buzzing with nervous energy. Tomorrow, the Huangdao sect was bringing 3 of their new disciples for a friendly exchange. Rumor had it they'd recruited a grade 6 talent who had opened 7 spiritual apertures in just a month and a half. Our best new disciples are Yang Rong and Zhao Yi. One student whispered, his face grim. And they've only opened 6 apertures. We're going to lose again. The mood was bleak. For years, the Qingyun sect had struggled to attract top-tier talent. Most powerful families sent their kids to the other 3 major sects. Aside from Qinyu, we didn't have much to brag about. I finished my meal and moved to stand up, but a heavy hand pressed down on my shoulder, forcing me back into my seat. I looked up. A boy about 17 years old stood over me. He had a cold, sharp face, like he'd been carved out of stone. A boy and a girl stood behind him like bodyguards. "I'm Zhao Yi," he said, cutting me off before I could speak. "You should know who I am." I nodded calmly. "I know. The grade 5 talent. What do you want?" Zhao Yi studied me for a long time, his eyes filled with disdain. "I'm here to give you some advice. Stay away from the saintess. If you have any sense, you'll renounce your position as her disciple immediately." I stared at him, genuinely confused. Why would I do that? Zhao Yi laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Are you playing dumb? My master is the saintess of the Jiangyun kingdom. Countless geniuses are desperate for her attention. If you were a talent, it would be one thing. But you're a scrap-grade loser. Clinging to her like a parasite won't end well for you. Do you want to pursue my master too?" I asked flatly. He stiffened. "Of course not. I know my limits. There's a massive gap between us in status and power. In the entire kingdom, only 3 people are even worthy of looking at her. But just because I can't have her doesn't mean a piece of trash like you should be near her." I leaned back and gave him a cold smile. "Since you aren't pursuing her, then my business with my master is none of yours. So what if I have a scrap-grade bloodline? I was the first to enter the sect this year. I was the first to open a spiritual aperture. Can you say the same?" Zhao Yi's mouth hung open. He wasn't expecting me to bite back. He thought I'd be some groveling coward, not someone throwing my minor firsts in his face. "Are those things even worth bragging about?" he hissed, his face reddening. "If the saintess hadn't taken pity on you, a loser like you wouldn't even be allowed through the front gates, let alone stand in my presence." I couldn't help but chuckle. This guy was looking for trouble for no reason. "Do you know why my grandmother lived to be 103? Zhao Yi blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "Because she minded her own damn business," I snapped. "You." Zhao Yi's hand drifted toward his weapon, his anger boiling over. If we weren't inside the sect, he probably would have tried to kill me right there. I just smiled and stood up. "Stop worrying about me and my master. Tomorrow is the exchange. You should focus on winning some glory for the sect instead of acting like a jealous child. If you're done, I'm leaving." I walked away without looking back. Behind me, I could hear Zhao Yi trembling with rage. In his mind, I was only arrogant because I had Yun Qingyao's protection. He thought that without her, I'd be nothing but dust under his boots. "Brother Zhao, that guy is unbelievable," the girl behind him chirped, her voice full of indignation. "He's just a dog acting tough because of his master," Zhao Yi spat. "You're our only hope, Brother Zhao, the other boy added. You're the only one who can handle that grade 6 genius from Huangdao. Zhao Yi straightened his back, his pride returning. I might have one less aperture, but I've lived a real life. I've traveled the Black Dragon Sea with my father. I've hunted blood-toothed wolves for 3 days without food or water. I've killed men. I've carved the horn off a jade dragon. That genius is just a flower in a greenhouse. When the fighting starts, he won't know what hit him. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds, and the Qingyun sect came alive. Despite our losing streak, everyone was curious to see the Huangdao sect's prodigy. A massive arena had been built in front of the martial hall, surrounded by a sea of disciples. I arrived with my fire spirit sword strapped to my back. The scale of the event was staggering. Figures were landing from the sky like locusts, and the roar of the crowd was deafening. Lin Yuan, over here. I heard Master's voice and looked up. She was seated in the high VIP section alongside a dozen elders. Zhao Yi and Yang Rong were already there, standing tall as the sect's shining stars. As I climbed the steps toward them, Zhao Yi caught my eye and sneered. Well, look who it is. The leader of the 3 trash has arrived. Zhao Yi, do not insult my disciple, Yin Xingyao said, her voice dropping an octave. Oh, it's not just me saying it, Elder Yun, Zhao Yi replied smoothly, his eyes dripping with malice. He's famous now. Everyone knows he's the one who tagged along with senior sister Qin, you just to survive. That's why the senior brothers call you the 3 concubines of the entrance ceremony, Zhao Yi sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. I didn't let it get to me. I was a scrap-grade bloodline in their eyes, a nobody. If they want to call me a concubine, let them, I said calmly. I'm just a passerby in their drama. Master Yin Xingyao didn't take it so lightly. She shot a cold glare at Zhao Yi. Zhao Yi, apologize to my disciple right now. Do not make me embarrass you in front of everyone. Zhao Yi's face turned pale. He gritted his teeth, looking like he'd just swallowed a fly. He turned to me, forcing the words out. Junior brother Lin Yuan, I was out of line. Please forgive me. It's fine, I replied. Seeing him squirm felt good. Having a master who actually protected me was a luxury I planned to enjoy. Lin Yuan, go greet the elders, Yin Xingyao instructed. I walked toward the high platform and bowed deeply. Disciple Lin Yuan greets the elders. The great elder stroked his beard, his eyes landing on the fire spirit sword strapped to my back. His cloudy eyes brightened. Lin Yuan, have you already mastered Elder Yun's heavenly vision sword technique? I nodded confidently. Master taught me with great care. I've already mastered the first 2 forms. Huh. Good. The great elder laughed, clearly pleased. 2 forms are more than enough. I saw Yun Qingyao's expression flicker with a hint of awkwardness. She knew I had only practiced the basic strokes. She probably thought I was bragging to save face, but she didn't realize that in the tower space, I had mastered far more than just the basics. Suddenly, the crowd surged. An elder from our sect led a group of outsiders toward us. At the front was an old man with wild, golden hair and a beard that made him look like a lion. Behind him were 3 teenagers, 1 boy and 2 girls, all around 17. The boy was handsome but lean, carrying a long sword that radiated a sharp, piercing intent. To his left stood a girl in black training gear, looking fierce and capable. To his right was a girl in a green dress, beautiful but cold, her chin held high with pride. Elder Xie, it's been a year. I trust you've been well, the great elder said, rising to greet them with a smile. Ha! Elder Xie Kuang laughed loudly. Elder Ming, I heard your Qingyun sect recruited a scrap-grade bloodline this year. And you're actually letting him challenge my disciples? Do you really think he's some legendary genius like Tuashi? Even a genius is nothing if they inherit a scrap bloodline. They just fade into the crowd. He gave a mocking thumbs up. I truly admire the courage of the Qingyun sect for taking in such trash. The great elder's smile tightened. I could tell he was cursing the man internally, but as the host, he had to keep up appearances. There are no waste bloodlines, only waste people, the great elder replied smoothly. We'll see what the boy is made of soon enough. Xie Kuang chuckled and pointed to the 3 youths behind him. Elder Ming, these are the new stars of my Huangdao sect, Chu Feiyong, Nalan Xian, and Li Jing. The 3 stepped forward and bowed in unison. Disciples greet the great elder of Qingyun sect. The great elder scanned them, his face darkening slightly. Even the weakest one, Li Jing, had an aura that rivaled Zhao Yi. The Huangdao sect had clearly struck gold this year. Impressive, the great elder said politely. He then pointed to us. These three are Zhao Yi, Yang Rong, and Lin Yuan. They will be your opponents today. Xie Kuang barely glanced at us, his eyes full of disdain. Let's not waste time. Let the matches begin. A referee elder jumped onto the arena floor. The exchange begins now. It's one-on-one. If one side wins all 3 matches, they are the victors. If not, we move to a second round. First disciples, take the stage. Li Jing, you go first, Xie Kuang ordered. The girl in the green dress leaped onto the stage with a graceful, practiced movement. She looked at the 3 of us with total indifference. Li Jing of the Huangdao sect. Grade 5 bloodline, 6 spiritual apertures opened. Who wants to lose first? Lin Yuan, go. Master Yin Qingyao whispered to me. Li Jing is likely the weakest of the 3. This is your chance to show what you've learned. Understood, I said. I leaped onto the stage, landing a few yards away from Li Jing. The crowd erupted in whispers. Most of the disciples looked confused or embarrassed. What is the sect thinking? Sending Lin Yuan against a grade 5 bloodline with 6 apertures? They probably just wanted to show off a few sword moves, someone muttered. Winning doesn't matter, they just want to save a little face. Winning doesn't matter? You guys are thinking too small, a voice shouted from the crowd. It was Wang Teng, the other waste of the sect. Wang Teng, what are you talking about? Wang Teng grinned. Do you honestly believe Lin Yuan will lose? I'll bet 10,000 copper coins right now that he wins. Are you crazy? He has 1 aperture. That's 1,000 pounds of force. Li Jing has 6. That's 6,000 pounds. In the face of absolute power, techniques don't mean a thing. You're all idiots, Wang Teng said, shaking his head. The sect wouldn't send him up there to be humiliated. I'm the bookie. 10,000 coins. Who's in? While the bets were being placed, I stood on the stage and gave a polite bow. Li Jing's face was twisted with anger. To her, fighting me was an insult. She was a top talent, and I was the scrap-grade joke of the Qingyan sect. Do you really think I'm the weakest link, Lin Yuan? She hissed. I heard your master taught you some sword moves. I'll make sure you don't even get the chance to draw your blade. I looked at her, my hand resting lightly on the hilt of the fire spirit sword. My master told me to come up here because she thinks you're the weakest. Personally, I don't think it matters. You aren't even worth me drawing my sword. I had to listen to my master, but that didn't mean I was going to be gentle. I wanted Li Jing to know the consequences of picking a fight with me. Her eyes flared with rage. She moved fast, her petite body blurring like a hunting leopard. In a few breaths, she was behind me. She lunged, her palms striking out with the weight of a collapsing mountain. The force was terrifying. It compressed the air around her hand, turning it into a solid wall of pressure aimed directly at my spine. My master, Yin Qingyao, turned pale. She recognized the moves. Li Jing was using the human-grade leopard step and the high-tier mountain pushing palm. Both were at the great success stage. Even a seasoned warrior with 6 apertures would have struggled to block this. Die! Li Jing screamed. Her palm slammed into my back. But there was no sound of breaking bone. Her hand passed right through me. My body dissolved into a flickering afterimage. Li Jing's face twisted in shock. I was already moving, my feet light and silent like a spirit cat. I flickered across the stage, appearing directly in front of her face. I didn't need a sword for this. I pulled my fist back and unleashed the tiger punch. It was a strike of pure, predatory power. Li Jing had no time to dodge. She crossed her arms in a desperate attempt to shield herself, but the impact was like a battering ram. The force surged through her entire body. She was sent flying backward, coughing up a spray of blood before crashing heavily into the dirt outside the arena. I walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at her. I told you, I said. You aren't worth me drawing my blade. The entire arena went silent. For 10 long seconds, nobody even breathed. Then, the crowd erupted. A scrap-grade bloodline disciple had just crushed a 5-aperture genius in a single move. Lin Yuan won. Give me my money. Wang Teng's voice boomed over the noise. He was laughing, collecting his bets from the stunned disciples. When they asked how he knew, he just grinned. He told them about the mission we took together, claiming I had helped kill a green forest python king. Up on the high seats, Yin Qingyao looked like she had seen a ghost. Her mind was a complete blank. She thought I was a waste who only opened one aperture by sheer luck. She had been protecting me this whole time, thinking I was helpless. Now, she was staring at me like I was a stranger. The other elders were losing their minds. They crowded around her, their faces full of envy. They saw that I had mastered 2 separate techniques to the level of perfection in just 2 months. They were convinced she had some secret, miraculous training method. Yin Qingyao recovered quickly. She put on a brave face and played along. I have my ways, she told them, sounding proud. I can turn even a scrap-grade disciple into a master. The elders from the rival Huangdao sect looked like they had swallowed flies. Their 3rd strongest disciple had just been humiliated by a joke. The referee jumped onto the stage, officially declaring me the winner. I stepped down and walked over to my master. The great elder was beaming, promising me a massive reward for bringing glory to the sect. I stayed humble. I told him it was all thanks to my master's brilliant teaching. Yun Qingyao looked at me, her eyes twitching. I could tell she was thinking about how I'd been lying to her this whole time. She looked like she wanted to scold me, but she couldn't hide her smile. The second match started soon after. Nalan Xian from the Huangdao sect stepped up against our Yangrong. As soon as the signal was given, Nalan Xian dropped low, his body almost touching the ground. He moved in a jagged, unpredictable zigzag. He looked less like a man and more like a venomous snake closing in for a kill. Everyone recognized Nalan Xian's footwork immediately. It was the wandering snake step, a high-grade technique. It was notoriously difficult to master because you had to train your body from childhood to be as flexible as a serpent. Seeing him move, I knew he was the top genius of the Huangdao sect. The crowd whispered, wondering if our disciple, Yang Rong, could stand a chance. I watched closely. My own Link's step relied on raw speed, but this wandering snake step was eerie and unpredictable. If Yang Rong didn't have a specific counter, he was finished. Sure enough, Yang Rong couldn't keep up. His own footwork was only at the entry level. Nalan Xian didn't give him a second to breathe, sliding from one side to the other after every strike. Yang Rong was a sitting duck. After a dozen exchanges, Nalan Xian found an opening and slammed a palm into Yang Rong's chest. The sound of bones snapping echoed through the arena. Yang Rong flew backward and crashed into the dirt, his face twisted in agony. It was a brutal move. Nalan Xian could have held back, but he chose to break Yang Rong's ribs instead. A martial artist needs that killer instinct, Xie Kuang, the rival elder, said coldly. Kindness to an enemy is cruelty to oneself. A sect elder rushed Yang Rong off for medical treatment. The atmosphere grew tense. It was time for the 3rd match, the main event. This was the battle to decide which sect truly held the power. Chu Feiyong stepped onto the stage and looked at our disciple, Zhao Yi. You're not my match, Chu Feiyong said calmly. Just give up. Zhao Yi smirked. You might have 7 spiritual apertures to my 6, but I can close that gap with skill. Today, I'm taking you down. Chu Feiyong just smiled. That calm look made Zhao Yi hesitate for a second, but he shook it off. He wanted to make a name for himself by crushing a 6th-grade bloodline genius. Zhao Yi, Qingyan sect, 5th-grade bloodline. Let's go, Zhao Yi announced. Chu Feiyong, Huangdao sect, 6th-grade bloodline. Heir of the Ghost Blade, Chu Feiyong replied. The crowd erupted. The Ghost Blade? That was the same legacy our own saintess held. I looked over at my master, Yin Qingyao. Her expression had shifted. She looked uncomfortable, almost haunted. Zhao Yi's confidence wavered. You're the Ghost Blade heir? Scared, Chu Feiyong didn't wait. He blurred across 30 yards in an instant, appearing right in front of Zhao Yi. His fists glowed with a searing heat, looking like molten iron. It was the burning fire punch, mastered to perfection. Zhao Yi scrambled to defend, his hands forming claws as he tried to parry the onslaught. The air shook with the sound of their collision. Zhao Yi was forced back step by step, nearly falling off the edge of the platform. Iron Wolf step, Zhao Yi barked. He lunged forward like a starving wolf, trying to regain his ground. Chu Feiyong didn't move. He stood his ground, batting away every strike with ease. After a heavy clash, Zhao Yi stumbled back. Ghost Blade Air? You're not much, Zhao panted, trying to act tough. He thought he had the upper hand because Chu Feiyong wasn't overpowering him yet. Chu Feiyong shook his head. You underestimate the Ghost Blade. If you actually had the strength to beat me, you would have done it by now. I've only used 30% of my power. Zhao snapped. Is that so? Chu Feiyong's aura suddenly exploded. His speed doubled. Before Zhao could react, Chu Feiyong was on him. A barrage of burning fire punches rained down like meteors. Zhao tried to use his Wolf Fang defense, but it shattered instantly. He was sent flying clear off the stage, hitting the ground and blacking out immediately. The silence was deafening. Chu Feiyong hadn't even drawn a sword, yet he'd crushed one of our best. Our elders looked grim. This kid was stronger than the top disciples from previous years. Our great elder forced a smile, clapping his hands. Impressive. The Huangdao sect has found a true monster. Xie Kuang laughed, clearly enjoying the victory. He even threw a jab back at us about me, the scrap-grade disciple. He joked that if I actually became a master, our sect would become the top power in the world. It was a blatant insult. The great elder tried to wrap things up, inviting them to stay for a few days to play the good host. But Nalen Xian stepped forward, interrupting. He wasn't satisfied. He wanted a second round of sparring. He wanted to go after me. The great elder hesitated. He knew Nalen Xian was dangerous. But Xie Kuang pushed him, asking why he didn't trust his own disciple. I didn't wait for them to decide for me. I walked forward, a calm smile on my face. Since you're so eager to learn, I said, let's see what you've got. The great elder nodded, agreeing to let the matches continue. He told us to take a break for the duration of a cup of tea to recover our strength. He sat back down and started sipping his tea, looking a bit more relaxed. I walked over to the side of the stage to rest near my master, Yin Qingyao. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of confusion and hope. Do you really have a chance against Nalen Xian? She whispered. Ever since I started showing my true power, she couldn't see through me anymore. I nodded confidently. I've opened 7 spiritual apertures. Beating him won't be hard. I didn't even use my full strength against Li Jing earlier. I had a plan. I needed to defeat all 3 disciples from the Huangdao sect, so I had to keep a few cards hidden up my sleeve. Yin Qingyao pointed a finger at me, her expression a mix of annoyance and pride. You better explain everything to me once this is over, or your master is going to have a word with you. The break ended quickly. Nalen Xian and I stepped onto the stage from opposite sides, facing each other with 10 meters between us. I can't believe a scrap grade like you mastered both the tiger punch and the lynx step, Nalen Xian said, his voice cold. You hurt Li Jing. I'm here to collect that debt. I didn't flinch. You hurt senior sister Yangrong. If anyone is collecting a debt, it's me. Let's see if you actually have the skill to back up those words. Nalen Xian let out a sharp cry and lunged. He moved like a lightning bolt, throwing a palm strike that whistled through the air. I didn't dodge. I met him head-on with a tiger punch. Our strike collided with a heavy thud. We both slid back 3 steps. I was holding back. I wanted to see his snake step in action first. If I had used my full power, that single punch would have ended him. Nalen Xian stabilized himself and moved again. This time, his body became fluid, gliding around me like a spirit snake. He targeted my vitals with eerie flexibility. His arms seemed to soften, his hands striking out like a cobra's fangs. Snake's spirit 18 bites, he hissed. His palms tore through the air, making a sizzling sound. It was a high-grade martial art. The crowd gasped. He had already mastered 12 of the 18 bites. Combined with his movement, he was almost invincible in close quarters. The elders looked worried. They thought my basic tiger punch wouldn't be enough. Even Yin Qingyao looked tense. She wasn't afraid I'd lose. She was afraid I'd get hurt. I shifted my stance. My hands began to move in a circular, grinding motion. 8 trigram palm, I muttered. I deflected every single bite he threw at me. My defense was like a rotating millstone, steady and unbreakable. The great elder gasped, nearly dropping his tea. He's mastered the 8 trigram palm to perfection too? That's 3 low-grade techniques at the maximum level. This is impossible. Elder Chio from the martial arts pavilion was even more shocked. He remembered me returning those manuals after only a month. He hadn't believed me when I said I'd finished learning them. Now he realized I hadn't just learned them. I perfected them. 1 month to master 3 techniques? The Great Elder whispered. The testing stone must have been wrong. He isn't scrap grade. He must be a god-grade talent. The elders in the guest seats started shouting in excitement. They truly believed our sect was about to rise to greatness. On stage, Nalan Xian's face darkened. None of his attacks were landing. He growled, unleashing the full power of his 6 spiritual apertures. His whole body seemed to coil like a giant serpent for one final, lethal strike. I realized then that my low-grade techniques had reached their limit. Even at perfection, they struggled against his high-grade moves. I shook my head slightly and stopped holding back. I unleashed the power of all 7 of my apertures. My tiger punch collided with his strike. A massive boom echoed through the arena, making the stage itself tremble. We both flew back. Nalan Xian tumbled over a dozen steps, while I only moved 2. Before he could even find his footing, I used the link step. I blurred across the gap and landed a heavy punch right in his chest. Nalan Xian flew off the stage and hit the dirt. Yes, the Great Elder shouted, clapping wildly. Xie Kuang from the Huangdao sect let out a forced laugh. Impressive, Elder Ming. But calling him a god-grade talent is a bit much, don't you think? Even a 7th-grade genius couldn't do this in a month. If he isn't a god-grade, then what is he? The Great Elder shot back. Xie Kuang's eyes turned cold. Let's see how your god-grade fares against my 6th-grade genius. Chu Feiyong stepped forward. He had noticed my strength increase in that last hit. He knew I had 7 apertures open, just like him. I looked directly at him. Chu Feiyong, do you dare to fight? The crowd went silent. No one expected me to challenge the heir of the ghost sword. He wasn't just a 6th-grade talent. He was a monster in his own right. Chu Feiyong laughed. Fine, rest for a moment, and then we'll see. I took another short break on the stage. When the time was up, Chu Feiyong walked to the center. He looked me up and down. You're crafty. 7 apertures and 3 perfected techniques in 2 months? You're at least a 6th-grade talent. I'm just a scrap grade, I replied calmly. You're carrying a sword. Draw it. Let's see whose steel is stronger. Chu Feiyong pulled his long sword from its sheath. The blade flashed with a blinding light as he swung it toward me. I drew my fire spirit sword and met him with basic strikes. Clang, clang, clang. The blades collided in a blur of sparks. We weren't using flashy techniques yet, just pure speed and precision. The air hissed as our swords danced. One mistake would mean death. The disciples watching were frozen in shock. They couldn't believe a scrap grade was going toe-to-toe with a sword master. Our basic sword techniques were so refined that the elders in the VIP seats were gasping for air. To them, it was impossible. Even cultivators stages above us struggled to show this level of mastery. Basic moves, chopping, stabbing, leaping, only looked this perfect after decades of grueling practice. They didn't know I had already put in that time. The air hissed as we fought. Chu Feiyong's eyes flared. He unleashed the first style of his ghost sword technique, a move called Iron Cutter. I didn't flinch. I swung my fire spirit sword, meeting his blade with the second style of my celestial sword technique. The collision was deafening. A massive shockwave rippled out, and I felt the vibrations travel up my arm. But I was stronger. Chu Feiyong stumbled back, his boots skidding across the stone stage. I didn't give him a second to breathe. I lunged forward like a striking snake, using the first style of my technique, palpitation. My blade aimed straight for his heart. He was fast, though. He twisted his body and swung his black sword in a blur, creating a dozen afterimages. It was the leading sword style. I heard my master, Yin Xingyao, gasp from the sidelines. She knew how dangerous this was. The shadows of his blade swarmed me, parrying my strike and forcing me back. Give up, Chu Feiyong roared. His strikes grew faster and heavier. Each blow felt like a mountain crashing down. Suddenly, the pressure became too much. My fire spirit sword was ripped from my grip and sent spinning into the dirt. I was unarmed. Chu Feiyong leaped into the air, his sword glowing with a dark, murderous light. He was using the third style, dissolving sword. The crowd screamed. They thought it was over. Without a weapon, I couldn't possibly block this. I reached into my robe and grabbed the Toasha blood jade. I didn't use it for its power, I used it as a rock. I slammed the jade directly against his descending blade. Boom. The impact felt like a grenade going off. A strange, ancient energy surged from the jade, traveling up Chu Feiyong's sword and into his chest. His blade flew out of his hand, and he was thrown back, vomiting a mouthful of blood. He stared at the jade in my hand, his face pale with shock. "The Tawasha blood jade," someone shouted from the stands. The elders stood up, their eyes wide with greed and disbelief. That jade was a legendary treasure, a key to changing one's very bloodline. It was worth a fortune, yet I had just used it to bash someone's head in. "You're insane," Chu Feiyong coughed, clutching his chest. "You used a treasure like that just to win a duel? If it breaks, you'll never enter the ancient ruins." "Winning is all that matters," I said coldly. "I'm doing this for my master." I didn't wait for him to recover. I rushed him, my fists blurred as I unleashed a perfected tiger punch. He tried to block, but he was too weak. My punches landed like hammers until he tumbled off the edge of the stage, landing in the dirt below. Silence fell over the plaza. Then, a roar of cheers erupted from the Qingyun sect disciples. We had won. For 3 years, we had been the laughingstock of these exchanges, but today, a scrap-grade disciple had taken down the heir of the ghost sword. Chu Feiyong scrambled to his feet, his face twisted in rage. "I don't accept this. It wasn't fair. He used the power of that jade." I just laughed at him. There were no rules against using treasures. A win is a win. Elder Xia Kuang was shaking with fury. He looked at the great elder and narrowed his eyes. "I don't believe it. No scrap grade could master 3 techniques and 2 sword styles in 2 months. It's impossible. Even a genius would struggle." He looked at me like he wanted to peel back my skin and see what was inside. "Lu Ren isn't a scrap grade. The first test must have been wrong. He's probably a hidden god grade talent." The great elder nodded, his interest piqued. "If the test was wrong, we must know the truth. Bring out the true dragon compass." My heart skipped a beat. The true dragon compass was the sect's greatest treasure, a tool that could measure bloodline talent with absolute precision. I looked at my master. "How accurate is it?" "It never lies," she whispered. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. I knew the truth. I really was a scrap grade. I had only achieved this through 55 years of hidden suffering. If that compass showed the world how pathetic my bloodline truly was, all of this would come crashing down. I arrived at the Qingyun sect only to be tested as a scrap-grade bloodline. Now, I was terrified. I was worried this true dragon compass would reveal that my bloodline was even worse than scrap. The compass was no ordinary tool. It held 110 dragon souls sealed inside. If someone had a first-grade bloodline, they would summon between 10 and 19 souls. A second grade would call forth 20 or more. It went all the way up to a god-grade bloodline, which would summon over 100. The more dragons that appeared, the stronger your potential. While Yun Qingyao explained this, 2 elders returned with a third man. This newcomer looked ancient. Even the great elder, Meng Qian, stood up and bowed to him with deep respect. The old man didn't say much. He just waved his hand, and a ring on his finger glowed. Suddenly, a golden compass 3 feet wide floated into the air. It was covered in carvings of majestic dragons that seemed ready to leap off the metal. The disciples gasped. The excitement was electric. This was the true dragon compass, the ultimate treasure of our sect. As long as we had this, no other sect in the eastern Xian territory would dare attack us. I looked at the floating relic and leaned toward my master. Is it really that powerful? I knew from the sect rules that there were thousands of sects in this land. Our Qingyun sect was only a second-rate power, and a weak one at that. The 4 major sects of our country were much stronger. Usually, a first-rate sect was defined by having a powerhouse in the heavenly stellar realm. We didn't have anyone like that. If the compass is activated, it can kill a heavenly stellar realm expert, Yun Qingyao whispered. My jaw dropped. That was like having a nuclear bomb. If our sect could produce a heavenly stellar expert to fully refine that compass, we would become a first-rate power, she continued, looking at me with hope. Lu Ren, if you truly have a god-grade bloodline, you could reach that level. Go, test yourself again. I nodded, my heart hammering against my ribs. I walked up to the golden compass. The old elder glanced at me. Place your palm on the surface. Relax your body. Yes, elder. I pressed my hand against the cold metal. Everyone held their breath. The Great Elder's eyes were wide, his heart probably racing faster than mine. If I was a god-grade genius, the sect's future was set. Even Elder Xia Kuang from the rival sect looked conflicted. He didn't want me to be a genius, but he couldn't look away. A low hum echoed through the air. Everyone stared. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 10 breaths passed. Nothing happened. The compass stayed silent. Not a single dragon appeared. I felt a wave of frustration. I knew I was a scrap, but was I really so pathetic that I couldn't even wake up one single dragon soul? The crowd was stunned. The old elder frowned, looking confused. Even a scrap grade should summon at least 1 soul. Is the compass broken? He muttered to himself, then waved me off. Step aside. Let me try. I moved back, feeling the sting of embarrassment. The old man placed his withered hand on the compass. The compass roared. Golden light exploded outward, and 59 golden dragon shadows soared into the sky, their cries echoing across the plaza. 59 souls. A 5th-grade bloodline, someone shouted. So why didn't Lu Ren summon anything? The old elder retracted his hand, and the dragons vanished. He tucked the compass away and looked at the great elder. His voice was raspy and cold. Meng Qian, this boy isn't just a scrap grade. He has a bloodline even worse than that. Simply put, he has no bloodline at all. He is bloodless. What? The great elder's eyes nearly popped out. How is that possible? How can a person have no bloodline? If he's bloodless, how did he master 3 martial techniques to perfection in a month? How did he learn Elder Yun's custom sword style? If the true dragon compass hadn't just proven it, no one would have believed it. The old elder went quiet for a moment, thinking. The compass doesn't lie. He is a scrap. But for him to achieve what he has in such a short time, there is only one explanation. He is a man of divine comprehension. The elders gasped. The tension in the air suddenly snapped. Elder Xia Kuang let out a long breath of relief and started laughing. Well, everyone, I won't overstay my welcome. It's time for us to leave. The great elder offered a polite invitation to stay, but Xia Kuang wasn't interested. He had lost the duel and lost face. He grabbed his disciples, Chu Feiyong, Nalan Xin, and Li Jing, and hurried out of the sect gates. Once they were gone, the great elder turned to the crowd. The exchange is over. Everyone return to your duties. Lu Ren, Elder Yun, and the rest of the elders, follow me to the martial hall. Inside the hall, I stood in the center while the elders lined the walls. The great elder smiled at me. Lu Ren, you defeated 3 geniuses today and brought honor to our sect. I am promoting you directly to an outer sect disciple. I stood there, stunned, until Yun Qingyao nudged me. Quick, thank the great elder. Thank you, great elder, I said quickly. But it was all my master's doing. If you want to reward someone, reward her. I couldn't have beaten Chu Feiyong without her. Don't be too humble, the great elder replied. We will reward Elder Yun as well. But tell me, do you know the purpose of that jade you won? I nodded. His face turned solemn. You are a man of divine comprehension. You must use this chance to enter the cave and find a way to improve your bloodline. Otherwise, no matter how high your comprehension is, that scrap bloodline will eventually drag you down and stop your progress. I looked at him, confused. Great elder, what exactly is a man of divine comprehension? Yun Qingyao stepped forward. Lu Ren, it means you are someone with extraordinary perception. You can master any technique or cultivation method almost instantly. I stood there, processing the words. So, what's the difference between comprehension and bloodline talent? I asked. Yun Qingyao explained it simply. A martial artist's potential is judged by 2 things, bloodline and comprehension. Bloodline sets your floor, the minimum level you're guaranteed to reach. Comprehension sets your ceiling, how high you can actually go. With high comprehension, you can master basic human-grade techniques in an instant, she said. But your bloodline limits you. It acts like a cage, preventing you from ever practicing high-level martial arts. I nodded, the realization hitting me. No wonder the great elder of the Huangdao sect looked relieved when he found out I was a man of divine comprehension. If you had a god-grade bloodline, Yun Qingyao continued, even with average comprehension, reaching the Heavenly Dipper realm would just be a matter of time. But with a scrap-grade bloodline, Even with your genius mind, it will be hard to achieve anything. You might not even break through the Yunchi realm. I looked at the elders, my expression serious. I will go to the Tawasha cave. Only I knew the truth. I wasn't some natural-born genius. My divine comprehension was just the result of spending 100 years practicing inside that nameless tower. But I also knew that if I didn't fix my bloodline, all that hard work would eventually hit a wall. I had to brave that cave, no matter the cost. Good, the great elder said, waving his hand. Prepare yourself. Come to the martial hall tomorrow. Elder Zhu Tai will give you your outer sect disciple token and talisman. You are dismissed. I bowed and left the hall quickly. Meanwhile, at the foot of the Qingyun sect mountain, Xia Kuang was leading his 3 disciples away. Chu Feiyong was fuming. Damn it. If it wasn't for that Tawasha jade, I wouldn't have lost. Xia Kuang shook his head. Don't beat yourself up. He's a man of divine comprehension. He can learn any low-level technique in seconds. Honestly, we're lucky his bloodline is trash. If he even had a 3rd-grade bloodline, he'd be terrifying. Chu Feiyong's face remained dark. He was the successor of a great legacy. If his master found out he lost to the disciple of a sect traitor, the punishment would be brutal. Feiyong, Xia Kuang said suddenly. I heard your master took in another prodigy. A 3rd-grade bloodline with incredible comprehension. Chu Feiyong nodded. Master took him in specifically for the Tawasha legacy. He's already broken his limits and opened 9 spiritual apertures. Once he enters the cave, he'll be unstoppable. Xia Kuang's eyes turned cold. Lu Ren has the jade, so he'll definitely show up. We cannot let him get that legacy. Tell your junior brother to kill him inside. We need to end this threat permanently. Don't worry, Elder, Chu Feiyong hissed. If Lu Ren dares to step into that cave, he's a dead man. Back in the martial hall, the atmosphere was tense. Yun Qingyao's face was ice-cold. Great Elder, the news about Lu Ren's comprehension will spread to every sect. And yet, you're letting him go to the Tawasha cave? Even if he beats the odds and gets the legacy, do you think the other sects or those old monsters will let him walk out alive? This was the first time she had ever shown such anger toward the sect's leadership. The great elder coughed awkwardly. Elder Yun, if he can change his bloodline, his potential will be monstrous. Besides, the boy wants to go himself. He wants to go? Yun Qingyao stood up abruptly and walked to the door. She turned back, her gaze sharp enough to cut. To you, Lu Ren is just an outer disciple. His life doesn't matter as long as the sect gets a genius. But he is my disciple. I don't care if he's a genius or a failure. I just want him to live. She left the elders sitting there with sour faces and walked out. I had just reached my courtyard when Yun Qingyao caught up to me. I wasn't nervous. Since everyone now assumed I was a man of divine comprehension, I didn't have to explain how I got so strong so fast. She pulled me into the living room, her face dead serious. Lu Ren, I am your master. You have to listen to me. I'm listening, I said. You cannot go to the Tawasha cave. I frowned. Why not? Because of your gift, she explained. The other sects won't just let you take the legacy. They will hunt you down inside that cave. Master, only those in the aperture opening realm can enter, I argued. With my strength and the heavenly elephant sword technique you taught me, no one should be able to touch me. She shook her head. You're being naive. The other sects have spent years preparing for this. There will be disciples who have opened 8 or 9 apertures. They'll have yellow-grade techniques. Some hidden masters have even trained secret successors just for this. How can you compete with that? I knew she was just worried about me, but I couldn't back down. Master, I have to go. I have a scrap-grade bloodline. If I don't change my fate now, I'll be mediocre forever. Seeing my determination, she sighed. Fine. There are 2.5 months left. If you can master the Thunder Hole and Storm Curse techniques by then, I'll let you go. I was stunned. That's it. If I learn those 2 moves, I can go. You think it's easy? She looked at me with pity. She didn't say it, but I knew what she was thinking. Those weren't techniques a scrap-grade bloodline could handle. Even with divine comprehension, a weak bloodline usually can't provide the energy required for anything above the lowest human grade. Is it a deal? I asked. If I master them, you won't stop me? It's a deal, she said confidently. You seem pretty sure I'll lose, I teased. You will definitely lose, she replied. Then let's raise the stakes. If I win, you aren't allowed to interfere with anything I do in the future. Deal? No, she snapped. I was a troublemaker in her eyes. She wasn't about to give me a free pass to cause chaos. I grinned. So, you are afraid of losing. Who's afraid? She huffed, her pride getting the better of her. Fine. Deal. Let's see if a scrap-grade bloodline can actually overturn the heavens. She turned and marched away, looking quite proud of herself. I stood in the courtyard, smiling. I had the nameless tower. As long as I had enough spirit stones, I could spend decades in there mastering those techniques. I just needed to find a way to make more money. I turned to head out, but a crowd of disciples was already heading my way. They were coming to congratulate the new genius of the sect. I even saw a few female disciples looking at me with stars in their eyes. It looked like my quiet life was officially over. Several female disciples even approached me to express their admiration. A few of them straight up asked if I wanted to become cultivation partners. I spent several hours dealing with the crowd before I finally managed to send them all away. Standing alone in my courtyard, I couldn't help but feel a bit emotional. This was the reality of strength. When you have power, the whole world treats you with kindness. When you're weak, you find nothing but malice at every turn. Junior brother Lu Ren. Congratulations, congratulations. Wang Ting laughed as he marched into the yard. Without a word, he shoved 5 bank notes into my hands. Senior brother Wang Tong, what is this for? I asked, completely baffled. I wondered if this was some kind of gift for my promotion to the outer sect. Junior brother, your duel earlier earned me 100,000 copper coins in bets. Wang Tong grinned. I'm splitting it with you. Here's 50,000. I didn't hesitate. I tucked the money away and looked at him. Senior brother, can you lend me a bit more? This 50,000 isn't quite enough. I had already done the math. 50,000 copper coins would only buy enough spiritual rice for about 13.5 years of cultivation inside the tower. That might not be enough time to master the other 2 moves of the celestial sword technique. If you're short on cash, I've got plenty of spare change, Wang Tung said. He didn't blink as he pulled out another 150,000 in notes and pressed them into my hands. I felt a genuine surge of gratitude. Thank you, senior brother. I'll pay you back as soon as I make some money. No rush, no rush. I'm not hurting for cash anyway, he said, waving me off before heading out. With 200,000 copper coins in hand, I headed straight to the cafeteria. I bought 4,000 pounds of spiritual rice. In the tower, that translated to 54 years of cultivation time. I was confident now. Mastering those 2 sword moves wouldn't take more than 20 years at most. I wondered what kind of face my master would make when I showed her the results tomorrow. I entered the tower space and drew my fire spirit sword. Even though I was technically buying time with money, I refused to waste a single second. I took a deep breath and began the grueling, repetitive cycle. Circulate energy. Step. Swing. I warmed up with the first 2 moves, throb and lingering, then immediately dove into the 3rd style, thunderbolt. If I could master this, its power would rival a high-grade human tier technique. I practiced for 7 long years. Finally, I felt the breakthrough. When I swung the sword, it moved like a bolt of lightning, fast and incredibly violent. It was at least 3 times stronger than the 2nd style. If I fought Chu Feiyong again, this move alone would crush his sword technique instantly. I didn't move on to the next style immediately. Instead, I spent another 3 months purely refining my control. Inside the square space of the tower, I pointed my blade at a massive boulder. A brilliant, lightning-like sword light erupted. The rock didn't shatter. It was covered in a web of tiny cracks. I blew a soft breath toward it, and the entire boulder collapsed into fine gravel. I had mastered it. My spiritual aperture was drained of energy, and my body felt weak, but I didn't care. I looked at the pile of stones and smiled. That single strike was as powerful as a high-grade human tier technique at the Great Achievement stage. Without resting, I started on the 4th style, Violent Storm. The Celestial Sword technique only had 4 styles. I knew I didn't have the innate talent or comprehension to create a 5th style on my own. I was a grinder, not a genius. I had to rely on my master to innovate so I could follow in her footsteps. Violent Storm was exactly what it sounded like. The strikes were meant to be a relentless, chaotic barrage that left the opponent no room to breathe. I believed that once I mastered this, I could one-shot any warrior with 7 spiritual apertures. Even an 8-aperture warrior would fall if they underestimated me. This move was comparable to a high-grade human tier technique at the perfection stage. 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. Inside the vast, empty space, I moved like a blur. My sword light swept out like a hurricane, slamming into a 10-foot-wide boulder. A series of deafening explosions echoed through the tower. When the dust settled, the rock looked like a piece of Swiss cheese, riddled with holes. I exhaled slowly. It had taken 17 years of bitter cultivation to master these 2 moves. If I faced Chu Feiyong now, it wouldn't even be a fight. But he was just a beginner. I knew there were far greater geniuses out there in the Xinhuang continent. Even my master was only considered a top genius within the borders of the Jianyan kingdom. I realized my limitations. My sword skills were improving, but my movement techniques and close-quarters combat were still lacking. Low-grade techniques, even at maximum level, couldn't compete with high-grade ones. I needed to explore the Tawasha cave dwelling. Legend said the master of that valley reached the rank of emperor with only a grade 2 bloodline. There had to be a secret there. If I couldn't improve my bloodline, I might never break through to the Spirit Creek realm. And even if I did, I couldn't keep fighting people using only low-tier trash. The next morning, I headed to the martial hall. Elder Zhu Tai was waiting for me. He led me to a side hall and opened a large cabinet filled with stacks of azure-colored robes. Pick out 5 sets of outer disciple uniforms that fit your size, he told me. I picked up the robes, feeling the weight of the fabric. I changed into one immediately and held the other 4 in my arms. I was officially an outer disciple now. I stood before Elder Zhu Tai as he registered me as an official outer disciple. He pulled out a stone token, carved my name, Lu Ren, into the surface, and tossed it to me. "This is your identity token," he said, his voice gravelly. "Drip a drop of your blood onto it. It links to your life force. If you die, the internal formation shatters, destroying the token. It's impossible to fake." I pricked my finger and let the blood sink into the stone. As I gripped the token, a surge of excitement hit me. In the Qingyun sect, an introductory disciple was basically a temp worker, someone who could be kicked out at any moment. But an outer disciple? That was a permanent position. Even if my cultivation stalled, the sect would provide for me. Out in the world, this token commanded respect. I was finally part of the system. "Let's go," Elder Zhu Tai said. "I'll take you to the outer peaks." We headed toward Tianzi Mountain. It wasn't just one peak, but a massive range of over a dozen mountains connected by swaying iron chain bridges. As we crossed, I looked around in awe. The introductory area I'd lived in was a shack compared to this. Here, the pavilions were grand, the gardens were lush, and the air felt different. I took a deep breath and felt a sudden jolt of energy. It was refreshing, like drinking cold water on a scorching day. "The air here, it's strange," I muttered. Elder Zhu Tai laughed. "That's not just air, kid. That's heaven and earth's spiritual qi. Outer disciples have reached the Spirit Creek realm. They don't need common food anymore. They breathe in this qi to sustain their bodies." I nodded, taking it all in. We passed training grounds where senior disciples were practicing martial techniques. I could feel the power vibrating off them. Most were using high-grade human tier moves, and I even spotted a few practicing yellow tier techniques. We reached the mountainside where the private courtyards were located. My new home was twice the size of my old one, and most importantly, it was private. No roommates. No distractions. "This is yours," Elder Zhu Tai said, stopping at a gate. "You've got the title, but you don't have the strength yet. Focus on breaking through to the Spirit Creek realm." He turned and left without another word. I knew what he was thinking. To him, a scrap-grade bloodline like mine would never touch the Spirit Creek realm. A moment after he disappeared, a familiar scent of sandalwood filled the air. My master, Yin Qingyao, walked in with a playful smile. "Congratulations, disciple," she said. "You're officially an outer disciple now. You don't have to worry about being kicked out, and with me backing you, no one will dare bully you." "Thank you, master," I said, bowing. Then, I looked her in the eye. "So, does this mean you'll let me go to the Tawasha cave dwelling?" Her smile vanished. "When did I say that? I told you, not until you master the Thunder Hole and rainstorm sword techniques. I couldn't help but grin. I already did. She stared at me, then burst out laughing. Lu Run, it's been one day. Even a genius with a god-grade bloodline couldn't master those in 24 hours. Watch, I said. I drew my fire spirit sword. The air hissed as I moved. I executed the thunder hole strike, a piercing, explosive thrust, immediately followed by the relentless, sweeping strikes of the rainstorm technique. The movements were fluid, perfect, and deadly. Yun Qingyao's jaw dropped. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. It was impossible, yet there I stood, the evidence humming in my hand. Can I go now? I asked. She frowned, her eyes filled with conflict. Lu Run, even with these moves, it's suicide. The geniuses going to that cave have grade 4 bloodlines. They've spent decades perfecting yellow tier techniques while staying at the peak of their realm just to prepare. You only have human tier skills. How can you compete? Master, I said, my voice steady. If I can find a way to change my bloodline, I can become a true genius. People won't look at you and say you took in a piece of trash anymore. I don't care what they say, she snapped, her voice softening. I only care about your life. The 3 major sects and their heirs will be there. They won't show mercy. I looked at her, seeing the genuine fear in her eyes. I have to try. I have to fight for a chance. She sighed, a long, defeated sound. If I were in your shoes, I suppose I'd do the same. Fine. I won't stop you. I'll even accompany you to the Martial Forest Garden when the time comes. She paused, a spark of determination returning to her eyes. I'm working on the 5th form of the Celestial Sword technique. If I finish it in time, I'll teach it to you. It might give you an edge. She hurried off, energized by the idea of helping me. I watched her go, a strange warmth in my chest. She was only 3 years older than me, but she treated me like her own kin. I knew the gap between us, in status and power, was a mountain, but it only made me want to grow stronger. The next day, I headed to the outer martial arts pavilion. It was a massive 3-story building, packed with secret manuals. I walked up to the elder in charge and showed my token. I'm here to pick a technique, I said. The elder squinted at my token, then looked up at me. You're Lu Ren? The one with the scrap-grade bloodline, who couldn't even summon a single dragon soul. I sighed. Word traveled fast in this place. That's me. Well, you're wasting your time, he grunted. The outer pavilion doesn't stock low-grade human tier junk. The lowest we have is high-grade. You won't be able to learn any of it. I froze. I needed something I could actually practice. The elder looked around to make sure no one was watching, then beckoned me closer. Listen, he whispered. I have a private manual. A low-grade human tier body refining technique I found in a secret realm years ago. It's not sect property. I'll sell it to you cheap. My eyes lit up. A body refining technique? That was exactly what I needed to survive the cave dwelling. Elder, are you really trying to side hustle me inside the sect library? Watch your mouth, he hissed. Do you want it or not? I originally planned to sell this to the geniuses, the elder explained quickly, his eyes darting around. But those arrogant kids look down on low-grade human tier techniques. My heart skipped a beat. I tried to keep my voice steady. Elder, would you mind letting me have a look? He reached into a dusty corner of a bookshelf and pulled out a thin manual. He slapped the dust off and held it out. I read the title, The Chi-Tempering Body Secret. It was exactly what he said, a low-grade human tier body refining technique. This particular manual had been passed down from 1,000 years ago. It allowed a cultivator to use their internal spiritual energy to temper their physical body, eventually reaching a stage called the glazed golden body. Before I could get a good look, the elder snatched it back. One price, 500,000 copper coins. If you don't have the cash, I'll let you buy it on credit. I stared at him, my jaw nearly hitting the floor. 500,000. This old man was trying to rob me blind. A typical low-grade human tier technique was worth maybe 100,000 at most. Plus, the sect usually let disciples borrow these for free. Almost no one spent hard-earned money on them. If you don't want it, forget it, he grunted, tucking the manual into his robe and closing his eyes. I'm not forcing you. He was playing hardball. He knew I had a scrap-grade bloodline, and he knew that for someone like me, a body-refining technique was the only way to survive. He was betting I was desperate. I let a small smile play on my lips. Elder, Is this thing really as amazing as you say? From 1,000 years ago? I just want to see if it's the real deal. You think I'd lie to you? The elder sneered, though I could see the hidden excitement in his eyes. He thought I was taking the bait. Fine, I'll give you 15 minutes to look at it. No more. He tossed the book at me. I sat down in a corner, turning my back to him so he couldn't see my face. He leaned back in his chair, looking smug, probably already imagining how he'd spend my 500,000 coins. I waited until I was sure he wasn't paying attention. Then, with a flick of my wrist, I vanished into the tower space, taking the manual with me. Inside the silent void of the tower, I opened the book. The technique had 4 levels: chi nourishing, steel bones, iron flesh, and finally, the glazed golden body. As I read the introduction, I realized why this was ranked so low. It wasn't because it was weak, it was because the first level, chi nourishing, was a nightmare to practice. You had to circulate spiritual energy through your apertures and across your entire body thousands of times. It was a slow, grueling process. Most people called it nourishing because it was like raising a child. It took at least 10 years of constant work just to see results. No sane cultivator would waste a decade on a low-tier technique. But if someone actually reached the glazed golden body, they'd be invincible among their peers. No attack could break their skin. This is worth way more than 500,000 coins, I whispered. I had over 100 years left in this tower. Time was the one thing I had in abundance. I sat cross-legged and began. I channeled the energy from my 7 spiritual apertures, letting it wash over my skin like a warm spring. The cost was staggering. I had to eat 10 times my usual amount of high-grade spiritual rice just to keep my energy from bottoming out. It was even more taxing than the explosive spirit art. Years passed. Thick, black grime began to seep out of my pores, the impurities of my mortal flesh. According to the manual, once the impurities were gone, the first level was complete. It took me exactly 10 years of constant, repetitive tempering. When I finally finished, I felt weightless. I had lost some weight, but my skin was as smooth as silk and as tough as leather. I jumped, soaring over 10 feet into the air with zero effort. My physical strength had exploded. Even without using spiritual energy, my raw body was now stronger than a typical spirit stream realm cultivator. I still had 20 years of tower time left, but I decided to stop. The second level, steel bones, required a higher cultivation base than I currently possessed. I stepped out of the tower. In the real world, only a single second had passed. I stood up and handed the manual back to the elder. Think about it, Lu Run, he said, eyes still closed. A technique like this is rare. If you don't buy it now, I might sell it to someone else tomorrow. It's too difficult to practice, I said calmly. I think you should save it for someone else. The elder bolted upright, staring at me in shock. He looked me up and down, sensing something was different about me, but he couldn't put his finger on it. You're sure? You don't want it? I shook my head. Why would I pay for something I had already mastered? Fine for 100,000, he muttered. I shook my head again. 300,000. I just smiled. 20,000, he barked, looking pained. That's my final offer. It's worth way more than that. Elder, keep it for someone with more talent, I said, turning to leave. Suddenly, a hand clamped onto my shoulder like a vice. I couldn't move an inch. I frowned, looking back at him. Elder, what is this? Tell me why, he demanded. You have a scrap bloodline. This is your best shot at power. Why refuse it? To be honest, I lied. A few years ago, a traveling master pointed me in the right direction and taught me a similar body-refining art. Impossible, the elder scoffed. I found this in a hidden realm. No one else knows this technique. I didn't argue. I simply rolled up my sleeve and held out my arm. My skin had a faint, silken luster to it, looking incredibly dense and tough. Chi nourishing, the elder gasped. He went pale, his voice failing him. The first level was the only part that took time. If you could clear that hurdle, the rest of the levels would come naturally as your cultivation rose. I was only 16, yet I had already achieved what should have taken a decade of focused work. Are you a failure or a genius? He whispered to himself. Elder, I prompted, breaking his trance. He coughed, trying to regain his composure. Lu Ren, tell me, how long did it take you to reach this level of chi nourishing? About a few months, I replied. I couldn't tell him it took 10 years. Besides, you need spiritual apertures to even start the process, and I had only opened mine a few months ago in the eyes of the sect. A few months, he repeated, his eyes wide. How is that even possible? The elder looked at me like I was a ghost. He couldn't wrap his head around how I'd mastered body refining so quickly. It didn't make sense to him. To properly nourish the body with qi, you had to spend years controlling spiritual energy, letting it flow through every inch of your skin. If you rushed, it failed. And for someone with a scrap-grade bloodline like me, the impurities in my body should have made the process take even longer. Elder, if there's nothing else, I'll be heading out, I said. I didn't wait for him to snap out of his shock. I turned and walked away. As I headed back to my courtyard, I thought about the mysterious stone tower. It had already saved my life and transformed my future. It was more than just a training space. It was a cheat code for reality. Back at my quarters, I unsheathed my fire spirit sword. I swung the blade, feeling the air whistle. My strength had skyrocketed. With my body refined to this level and the spiritual energy from my 7 apertures combined, I felt unstoppable. I was confident I could take down a martial artist with 8 apertures easily. The upcoming trip to the Tua Shi Cave Mansion didn't scare me anymore. Only those in the aperture realm could enter. If the disciples from the 3 major sects tried to cause trouble, I wouldn't hesitate. I'd kill them all. For the next few days, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I ate and I slept. I had spent 55 years grinding inside that tower. I deserved a few days of laziness. Meanwhile, on the peak of hurricanes, my master Yun Qingyao was pushing herself to the limit. She stood in her training robes, her thin frame moving with lethal grace. Her sword flashed like lightning. With a sharp cry, she unleashed a strike that sent a gale screaming toward a nearby mountain. The impact shattered a massive rock formation into dust. She sheathed her sword and nodded to herself. She had finally finished creating the 5th form of her technique. If I could learn this, my survival chances would double. She headed straight for my courtyard on Heaven's Sun Mountain, expecting to find me training like a madman. When she pushed open the door, she didn't see me practicing. Instead, she heard loud, rhythmic snoring. Her face turned green. It was late afternoon, the time most people were finishing their day, and I was fast asleep. You heartless little brat, she hissed. She had spent days racking her brain to invent a new sword style for me, and here I was, dreaming away. She almost turned around to leave, but she knew the cave mansion was opening soon. She marched to my bed and grabbed me by the ear. Ow! Ow, ow, ow! I screamed, jolting awake. In my half-asleep state, I thought I was under attack. My instincts took over. I channeled every ounce of my power into a single palm strike. Yun Qingyao's eyes widened. She swept her hand forward, manifesting a golden net of qi to block me. My palm slammed into the net. The golden energy shattered instantly. The force sent my master stumbling back several steps. How is this possible? She whispered. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. That chi net should have been enough to stop anyone with 8 apertures. I rubbed my eyes and realized who I'd just attacked. Master? What are you doing here? What was that power? She demanded, her face cold. You only have 7 apertures open, but that strike. Was I imagining things? I played it off as best I could. I don't know what you mean. Why are you here, Master? I finished the 5th form of the heavenly image sword style, she said, her eyes still searching mine. I came to teach it to you. My eyes lit up. Finally. Show me. We went out into the courtyard. She moved like the wind, her blade sweeping away every fallen leaf until the ground was spotless. I was genuinely impressed. That single strike was easily at the entry level of a yellow tier technique. With my natural talent, I could have practiced for 100 years and never invented something that elegant. Come here, she said. Since your bloodline is poor, I have to guide you hand over hand. I grabbed my fire spirit sword and stood in front of her. She reached out and gripped my wrist to guide my movement. The moment her fingers touched my skin, she froze. My skin felt like polished silk, incredibly dense and tough. You refined your body? She gasped. To reach this state, a martial artist usually had to reach the spirit stream realm and consume countless rare herbs to purge their impurities. A scrap-grade disciple like me shouldn't have been able to do it at all. I found a body-refining manual in the library. I lied quickly. I just practiced it on the side. She looked skeptical but didn't push it. So many things about me defied logic lately. She started the lesson, guiding me through the movements. But as soon as I started trying to do it on my own, my movements became clumsy and awkward again. Seeing my pathetic form, she sighed, convinced once more that I was still a talentless hack. Just keep practicing, she said, turning to leave. Suddenly, the Tuashi blood jade in my pocket began to vibrate violently. I pulled it out, and it was glowing with an intense, pulsing red light. Master, what's happening? Her expression shifted instantly to one of urgency. We have to go to the Martial Forest Garden right now. The Tuashi Cave Mansion is opening early. She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the sect gates. All across the kingdom of Jiangyun, every martial artist holding a piece of blood jade felt the same pulse. The news spread like wildfire. The mansion had opened on time for centuries. An early opening meant something was wrong, or something big was happening. We reached the base of the mountain. Yun Qingyao let out a sharp, piercing whistle. A moment later, a massive cloud-colored bird soared down from the sky. It was a cloud sparrow, a third-rank spirit beast. We jumped on its back and took flight, heading toward the Martial Forest Mountains. The cloud sparrow was a magnificent beast. Its body was as large as a full-grown lion, covered in brilliant green feathers that shimmered in the sunlight. Its strength was comparable to a martial artist in the Yunhe realm. Yun Qingyao leaped onto its back and sat down gracefully. Sit behind me, disciple, she commanded. We need to reach the Martial Forest Garden immediately. I didn't hesitate. I climbed up and sat right behind her. She patted the bird's head and whispered, Shaoli, to the Martial Forest Garden. The bird let out a piercing shriek. With a powerful flap of its wings, it shot into the sky. It was incredibly fast, soaring through the layers of clouds like a bolt of lightning. The wind whipped against my face with a fierce, stinging force. It felt like my skin was burning. If I hadn't already reached the oxygen refining stage of body tempering, I wouldn't have been able to handle the pressure of this speed. Once the flight stabilized, I noticed Yun Qingyao was focused on the horizon. I took the opportunity to slip my consciousness into the nameless tower. I spent 20 grueling years of bitter cultivation inside that space. By the time I emerged, I had mastered the 5th move of the Heavenly Elephant Sword art, wind sweeping the clouds. Its power was immense, easily rivaling a low-grade gold-rank weapon. I took a deep breath, feeling the new strength in my limbs, and looked down. We were approaching the Martial Forest Mountains in the southwest of the Jiangyun Kingdom. A massive canyon cut through the mountain range, with steep rock walls rising hundreds of feet on either side. We spiraled down into a deep valley. As we landed, I scanned the crowd. The valley was packed. There were young people my age, middle-aged warriors, and even elders in their 70s. The older they were, the more terrifying the aura they radiated. Every eye turned toward us the moment we touched down. The Saintess is here, someone whispered. Is that guy next to her the legendary scrap-grade disciple? Another voice mocked. I heard she actually gave him a piece of the Tuashi blood jade. The chatter was constant. Yun Qingyao ignored them and leaned toward me. Disciple, once the Tuashi Cave Mansion opens, be careful. Many of these people have suppressed their realms and broken their physical limits just for this. Some have opened 9 spiritual apertures specifically to claim the ancient inheritance. I nodded, my eyes fixed on the cliff ahead. Embedded in the rock was a massive, 10-foot-tall crimson stone door. Brilliant light pulsed from the cracks in the seal, vibrating with raw energy. Above the door, 4 large characters were carved into a plaque, Tuashi Cave Mansion. So, Yun Qingyao, I heard you took in a piece of trash as a disciple. I wondered if the rumors were true. A loud, mocking voice echoed through the valley. A lean young man in black robes approached. He carried a pitch-black ancient sword on his back and radiated a cold, sharp energy. Behind him followed a younger boy, also in black, carrying a matching sword. It's Gu Yifan, someone gasped. Gu Yifan was one of the 3 prodigies of the Jiangyun Kingdom. He possessed a 7th-grade bloodline and was the top disciple of the Ghost Sword King. The boy behind him was Tang Hao, a 3rd-grade talent being groomed as his successor. I didn't like his tone. I looked him dead in the eye and sneered. And what kind of thing are you supposed to be? Gu Yifan's face twisted in rage. He couldn't believe a trash, who hadn't even reached the spirit stream realm, dared to talk back to him. "What did you say?" he roared. A violent wave of true chi erupted from him, crashing toward me like a tidal wave. The pressure was suffocating. I braced myself to dodge, but Yin Qingyao was faster. She stepped in front of me with a casual flick of her wrist, shattering his energy wave into nothing. "Gu Yifan, you dare try to hurt my disciple?" Her voice was bone-chillingly cold. An even more powerful aura exploded from her, forcing Gu Yifan back several steps. In that moment, she looked like a goddess descending to earth. Gu Yifan regained his footing, his expression grim. "Junior sister, I didn't expect you to reach the 7th level of the Divine Sea realm so quickly." They had both been disciples of the Ghost Sword King once, both 7th-grade bloodlines. But Yin Qingyao had left that sect to become an elder at the Qingyan sect. Gu Yifan clearly thought she had gone soft. "Don't call me that," she snapped. "I am no longer a Ghost Sword follower. Leaving was the stupidest mistake of your life." Gu Yifan laughed contemptuously. "I've mastered the 10th sword of the Ghost Sword style. You can't stop me." "Then show me," she replied. Yin Qingyao's body rose into the air. Her white robes fluttered as dozens of sharp sword shards of energy began to orbit her. She looked like a literal blade standing upright, ready to pierce the heavens. Sword intent. Gu Yifan's face went pale. "You've actually cultivated sword intent." "Ghost sword," he screamed, lunging forward. His black sword flew from his back, spinning through the air. A ghostly, hideous phantom materialized around the blade, opening its maw to swallow Yin Qingyao whole. But the sword stopped dead 3 feet away from her. An invisible field blocked it completely. "Purple Thunder Dragon Sword," Yin Qingyao shouted. Purple lightning flashed between her hands, condensing into a massive dragon-shaped blade. It let out a roar that shook the valley. She swung it down. The thunderous collision echoed through the canyon. Gu Yifan tried to block, but by the 7th strike, his black sword was knocked from his hands. He flew backward, blood leaking from the corner of his mouth. The lightning dragon hovered over his throat for a second before vanishing back to Yin Qingyao's side. "Gu Yifan," she said calmly, "if it weren't for our old ties, I would have killed you just now." The silence in the valley was deafening. One of the 3 prodigies had been humiliated in seconds. Even Tang Hao looked terrified. The crowd was stunned. They hadn't seen her fight in years, and this display was beyond anything they imagined. I stood there, completely awestruck. This was my master's true strength. She was terrifying, beautiful, and peerless. I realized then just how far I had to go if I ever wanted to stand beside her. I realized then that my master wasn't just protective. She was dangerous. But the tension in the valley didn't vanish with her victory. Gu Yifan clutched his chest, his face twisted in a cold, hateful sneer. "Junior sister, I may not be your match," he spat, "but this trash disciple of yours won't leave the camel tongue abode alive today." As he spoke, a younger man stepped out from behind him. It was Tang Hao. His eyes were like ice as they locked onto me. "If you have the guts, don't enter the cave," Tang Hao challenged. "Out here, your master can protect you. Inside, you're on your own. Step 1 foot inside, and I'll kill you." I saw my master's brow furrow. I'd heard of Tang Hao. He was the successor of the Ghost Sword style, a genius who had already broken his limits to open 9 spiritual apertures at a young age. "Fine," I said, nodding calmly. "I'll be waiting." I didn't feel a flicker of fear. More people began to arrive. Elders from the 4 major sects descended upon the valley, including Xie Kuang from the Zodiac sect and Meng Qian from the Qingyan sect. The Camel Tongue abode only opened once every 3 years. Everyone wanted to see if someone would finally claim the ancient inheritance. It had been empty for years, but this time was different. They had a 9-aperture genius and a scrap-grade disciple of a saintess entering the fray. The anticipation was thick enough to choke on. About 50 young disciples gathered near the entrance. Most were over 30 years old with at least 9 apertures opened. I was the outlier, the only one brave, or perhaps stupid enough, to enter with only 7 apertures. Suddenly, a thunderous roar shook the ground. The massive stone doors of the cave began to grind open. Blinding light poured out, obscuring everything inside. A heavy, rasping voice echoed from the depths. "Those who hold the blood jade possess a bloodline below grade 4. and are within the aperture realm may enter. Pass the trials, and the inheritance is yours. Before the voice even finished, the crowd surged forward. Master, I'm going in, I said. I didn't wait for a reply and dived into the light. The world spun. My head throbbed with a sudden wave of nausea. When my vision cleared, I was standing on a massive stone altar shaped like a Bagua map. 8 gates surrounded me, each marked with an ancient character: Qian, Kuan, Zhan, and the rest. What is this place? I muttered. Haha, my luck is incredible, a voice boomed. A middle-aged man appeared on the altar. When he saw me, he burst into a frantic laugh. His name was Zhao Kuan. With hundreds of people entering, the teleportation was random. To him, landing in the same spot as the famous trash disciple was like winning the lottery. By luck, do you mean you get to kill me? I asked flatly. Exactly, Zhao Kuan grinned, drawing a large gold-ringed broadsword. Killing you means one less competitor. Besides, you dared to provoke Tang Hao? Ridiculous. I've trained for 30 years. I have 8 apertures and 8,000 pounds of strength. My blade technique is at the perfection stage. Killing you will be as easy as stepping on a bug. He pointed his sword at me, looking far too relaxed. Any last words? What are these gates? I asked, pointing behind him. Zhao Kuan seemed in no hurry. Each gate is a trial. Pass one, and you move to the next altar. Fail, and you're kicked out. Pass all 8, and you reach the final trial. But you won't live to see. I didn't let him finish. I lunged. My movement was a blur. My long sword hissed through the air like a venomous snake. It was too fast for him to react. Poochie. My fire spirit sword pierced his chest, straight through the heart. Blood sprayed across the stone. Zhao Kuan stared at me, his eyes wide with shock and terror. You have no honor. I didn't care about honor. I twisted the blade. He coughed up a final spray of blood and slumped to the floor dead. I knelt down and began searching his body. On his finger, I found a plain black ring. When I touched it, I felt a faint ripple of spiritual energy. A storage ring. I grinned and slipped it onto my own finger. I had my mysterious tower space for big secrets, but I needed something normal to store my sword and supplies in public. I peered inside the ring's internal space. My eyes widened. There were 50,000 copper coins, several low-grade weapons, 1 high-grade weapon, and a weathered manual. I pulled the manual out. Explosive Spirit Secret Technique, I whispered. This was a rare find. Secret techniques weren't like standard cultivation. They provided temporary, massive power boosts in combat. This one allowed a practitioner to gather all the energy from their apertures into a single point, doubling their explosive power. The more apertures I opened, the stronger it would become. It was perfect for me. I kept digging and found 13 silvery white stones in a corner. My heart skipped a beat. Low-grade spirit stones. These contained concentrated spiritual energy that could speed up cultivation by 10 times compared to normal meditation. I couldn't use them yet since I hadn't reached the Spirit Creek realm, but they were a fortune. This guy was loaded, I muttered, moving everything into my tower space. If I could find enough spiritual rice to fuel my training, I could master this explosive spirit technique before the final trial. Then, even if I ran into Tang Hao, I'd have the strength to tear him apart. I looked at the spirit stones again. If spiritual rice provided energy, maybe these stones could do the same. I had to try. I picked up the fire spirit sword and hacked off a small piece of a low-grade spirit stone. It was about the size of a fingernail. Without hesitating, I swallowed it whole. A massive surge of spiritual energy exploded inside me. It swept through my body like a tidal wave. My 7 spiritual apertures began to drink greedily, soaking up every drop of power until they reached their limit. I felt a rush of pure joy. In this world, if a normal person doesn't eat, they starve. But for a practitioner, spiritual energy is the real food. Without it, my body would eventually wither away. These stones were my lifeline. I wonder how long these will last me, I whispered. If any high-level expert saw me using spirit stones just to fill my stomach, they'd probably cough up blood in rage. It was a total waste. A single low-grade spirit stone cost at least 200,000 copper coins. Most disciples had to slave away at sect missions just to earn one for cultivation. Eating them was unthinkable. But I didn't care about the cost. Resources could be earned again, but strength was everything. If I wanted to survive the trials of the Tawasha ancient lands, I needed power. I closed my eyes and focused on the explosive spirit secret technique. I had already memorized the manual. Now, it was time for the hard part. I began to move the energy from two of my apertures, trying to fuse them into a single point. Inside me, a small vortex began to form. It trembled violently before suddenly collapsing. I didn't stop. I tried again and again. Every time I failed, the energy dissipated, leaving me feeling hollow and hungry. I had to consume more spirit stone fragments just to keep going. The energy consumption of this technique was terrifying. Time passed differently inside the tower space. By the 5th year of training, I finally did it. A massive spiritual vortex stabilized inside my body. It didn't break. Suddenly, a shockwave of power erupted from the vortex, slamming into my limbs. I let out a muffled groan. The strength coursing through me was incredible. I could feel it. This single strike carried over 4,000 pounds of force. And that was just from fusing two apertures. Sweat poured down my face, but I was grinning. It worked. I didn't waste a second. I moved on to the third aperture. I expected it to get harder as I went, but I was wrong. My control was improving. It took less than 5 years to fold the third aperture into the mix. Then the fourth. Then the fifth. Eventually, a fist-sized vortex was spinning at high speed inside my chest. I let out a sharp shout and channeled that energy into my right fist. I punched the air. A thunderous boom echoed through the space. The sheer force of the blow created a visible shockwave that rippled outward. At least 10,000 pounds, I muttered, staring at my hand in shock. 10,000 pounds of force was usually reserved for practitioners who had opened 10 apertures. With my physical strength combined with this technique, a 10-aperture warrior wouldn't stand a chance against me. I looked at my pile of spirit stones. They were all gone. If I had just a few more, I might have been able to fuse the 6th. But it was time to move. I left the tower space and stood before the 8 gates of the altar. I chose the King Gate, the Gate of Water. As I stepped through, the world blurred. I found myself standing in the middle of a vast, roaring ocean. Massive waves, tall as mountains, crashed down from every direction. So, every gate is a trial, I realized. A giant wave slammed into me with the force of a falling building. I braced myself. The pressure was immense, but I didn't break. If I hadn't spent those years tempering my body with the oxygen body refining technique, that single wave would have crushed my bones. I stood my ground, letting the ocean batter me. Through the spray, I saw the next gate. I pushed forward, fighting the current, and dove into the Lee Gate. The scene shifted instantly. Now, I was standing on a platform surrounded by raging pillars of fire. From the flames, giants made of molten lava emerged. Their glowing red eyes locked onto me, and they charged. They weren't incredibly strong, maybe level 7 aperture strength at most, but there were many of them. For a normal disciple, this would be a death trap. I drew my fire spirit sword. My blood was pumping. I lunged at the nearest giant, my blade blurring. With a single flick of my wrist, I tore the creature apart. I moved like a phantom, executing the celestial sword style with perfect precision. No matter how many giants closed in, they couldn't touch me. I hacked my way through the horde and dove into the next portal, the Zhun Gate, a world of thunder. Lightning bolted from the sky, striking the ground with lethal force. I used my spirit cat steps, weaving through the bolts with inches to spare. The Zhen Gate, a world of falling mountains. I used my raw strength to shatter the boulders as they plummeted toward me. The Sun Gate, a world of wind. The gales were like invisible blades, cutting at my skin, but my toughened body ignored the stings. One by one, I tore through the trials. I went through 6 gates in total, moving with a speed that would have left the other disciples speechless. Finally, I stepped into the Kuan Gate. I had no idea that back in the real world, everyone was watching. Everything I did inside the gates was being watched by the people outside. Every move, every strike, every breath. I stepped through the final portal, and the world shifted. I was no longer surrounded by elements. I stood in a void of pure white mist. The 8 gates were gone. Suddenly, streaks of red light converged in front of me. They took the shape of massive, terrifying beasts. They looked like lions, but with bodies scaled like dragons and long, whip-like tails. 8 of them circled me. Their aura was heavy, matching my own strength perfectly. Then, a deep, booming voice echoed through the void, the same voice that had opened the cave dwelling. The Qian Gate Trial. Survive for the duration of 1 incense stick. If you are still standing when the time is up, you pass and will be teleported to the Tawasha Square. The voice grew even more serious. This trial has been attempted 1,300 times. It has only been passed 30 times. This is the hardest trial of the 8 gates. The hardest one? I barely had time to process that before the Tawasha fire beasts moved. Their eyes burned like literal suns. With a collective roar, they lunged. I didn't panic. I watched them closely. One beast swiped a razor-sharp claw at my throat. My sword was out in a flash. I swung with everything I had. The beast was cleaved in 2. It didn't bleed. It exploded into 2 swirling clouds of crimson flame. I didn't stop. I spun, slicing through 2 more beasts. They also burst into flames. I thought this was going to be easy. I was wrong. As I prepared to strike the others, those 6 clouds of flame didn't dissipate. They reshaped themselves. Suddenly, there weren't 5 beasts left. There were 13. The more I killed, the more they multiplied. I frowned and pulled back into a defensive stance. My celestial sword style and my perfected spirit cat steps were my best friends right now. I didn't need to win. I just needed to survive until the incense burned out. I parried and dodged, moving like a leaf in the wind. 13 beasts couldn't touch me. I could do this all day. But the trial wasn't done playing games. Without me even touching them, the beasts began to split on their own. In seconds, 13 became 26. What is this? I muttered. I realized then that it didn't matter if I attacked or not. They were going to multiply regardless. If I let them keep splitting, I'd eventually be buried under a mountain of claws. Fine, I growled. I'll kill you all before you can split again. I stopped holding back. I tapped into the power of all 7 of my spiritual apertures. My fire spirit sword turned into a blur of silver light. I unleashed a storm of sword shadows. It was like a torrential downpour of steel. One by one, the 26 beasts were pierced through. They exploded like a grand finale of fireworks. The void was filled with floating embers. I took a breath, thinking it was over. Then, the embers began to gravitate toward the center. They didn't form small beasts this time. They fused into one single, colossal monster, 10 times larger than the others. Its aura was suffocating. It was far stronger than I was. The giant Tawasha beast opened its maw and spat a rain of fire at me. I leaped back, using my spirit cat steps to weave through the fireballs. The monster seemed to have a mind of its own. Seeing me dodge, it went into a frenzy and charged. I tried to block with my sword, but the sheer force was overwhelming. Within 3 moves, the beast swiped my sword right out of my hand. It clattered across the white floor, out of reach. Outside, I knew what they were saying. Gu Yifan was probably laughing his head off, talking about the gap in bloodline talent. To them, a scrap grade, like me, only had basic, low-tier techniques. Even at max level, those techniques shouldn't be able to stop a monster of this level. I could see the elders shaking their heads. Even Elder Meng Qian's face had gone pale. Only my master, Yin Qingyao, stood her ground. She stared at my image, her fists clenched so tight her knuckles were white. I believe in you, she whispered. Back in the void, the beast's massive claw came crashing down like a falling mountain. The wind from the strike alone nearly knocked me over. I realized I couldn't dodge anymore. Fine, I said, planting my feet. Let's see who breaks first. I didn't run. I stood my ground and raised my palms in a bagua formation. The giant palm slammed into me. The impact sent me flying. I hit the ground hard, sliding back dozens of feet. I coughed up a mouthful of blood, the copper taste filling my mouth. I stood up, wiping my chin. That's it, I shouted. Is that all you've got? A fire started burning in my chest. Not spiritual fire, but pure battle intent. That first hit told me everything I needed to know. My body, tempered by 55 years of grueling physical training, could take it. If I hadn't spent that time in the tower, that one hit would have turned me into a red smear. Now, it was just a bruise. The beast attacked again, and again. I didn't use a sword. I used my bagua palms to meet every single blow head-on. The sound of the collisions echoed like thunder. After a dozen massive strikes, the giant beast began to crack. It couldn't handle the rebound of its own strength against my body. With one final roar, it dissolved into light. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the crowd was stunned. They expected me to hide, to run, to fail. They never expected me to stand there and take it like a wall of iron. "Is his body made of steel?" someone yelled. I saw the elders' faces through the screen. Their narrow-minded view of what a scrap could do was shattered. My master just smiled. I had survived. Elder Ming Qian couldn't stop laughing. He looked at the screen, thrilled that I had actually survived for the duration of an incense stick. My master, Yin Qingyao, just gave a faint, awkward smile. She wasn't some genius talent scout. She had recruited me on a whim, never imagining her scrap-grade disciple was this capable. The elder's eyes flashed with excitement. I had passed the 8 gates. Only the ultimate trial remained. If I cleared that, I might even have a chance to evolve my bloodline. But Elder Xie Kuang just snorted, his voice cold. He didn't believe I could do it. No one had passed that trial in years. Then, the crowd outside went silent. On the screen, I wasn't moving toward the goal. "What is he doing?" Gu Yifan asked, sounding baffled. I had been teleported to a massive plaza inside the cave. Stone pillars lined the area, and above me sat a giant, blood-red portal. It was open, waiting for me to start the ultimate trial. But I wasn't an idiot. I knew my limits. I had only passed the previous gate by relying on my physical strength. If I jumped in now, I'd probably die. I needed more power. And the best way to get it? Hunting. I didn't plan on being a murderer, but if someone tried to cross me, I wouldn't hesitate to end them. I slipped behind a massive stone pillar, hiding my presence. Then, I ducked into my nameless tower space. I needed to recover from my injuries and prepare. Outside, the observers were losing their minds. They thought I was throwing away my only chance. The ultimate trial only allowed one person at a time. If I waited, someone else would catch up. "He's badly hurt from that beast's attack," Xie Kuang sneered. "He's hiding like a rat to lick his wounds." As they argued, a new figure appeared in the plaza. It was an old man with white hair and a jagged scar across his forehead. Huang Qi. He was one of the top contenders, a man with 9 spiritual apertures opened. Even though his bloodline was only 3rd grade, his experience made him deadly. "If Huang Qi finds him, the kid is dead," Gu Yifan laughed. I watched Huang Qi from behind the pillar. He hadn't seen me yet. He looked at the open portal and beamed, clearly thinking he was the first one there. I decided to play the part of the victim. A high-level hunter always appears as prey. I shifted my weight, intentionally kicking a loose stone. "Who's there?" Huang Qi snapped. He marched over and found me cowering behind the pillar. His shock turned into pure arrogance. "You? The scrap-grade brat? I can't believe you beat me here." I wiped a smear of blood from my lip, letting my eyes fill with fake terror. "What do you want?" "To kill you, obviously," he said, his voice dropping. "Only one person can take the trial. If I wasn't hurt," I gritted my teeth, "you wouldn't stand a chance." Huang Qi laughed, crossing his arms. "So you're crippled from the gates. No wonder you didn't go inside. Heaven is on my side today." He didn't waste another second. He lunged, his hand glowing with spiritual energy. It was a high-level technique called the Dragon Seizing Hand. I could see the phantom image of a claw forming in the air. The pressure was immense, far stronger than anything I'd faced before. I didn't move. I waited until his palm was inches from my face. Now, I triggered my burst spirit secret art. I fused the energy of 5 spiritual apertures into a single, violent vortex. My fist shot out. A simple tiger punch, but backed by a mountain of force. Huang Qi's face twisted with contempt. He thought his superior technique would crush me. We collided. A sickening crack echoed through the plaza. Huang Qi screamed. He flew backward, slamming into the ground. His right arm was shattered, hanging at an impossible angle. He tried to move, but he was pinned by the sheer impact. "How?" He wheezed, his arrogance replaced by pure horror. "You only have 7 apertures." My dragon hand was at peak mastery. "You talk too much," I said. I stepped forward and finished him with a single strike. I dragged his body behind the pillar and started stripping him of his gear. I found a jade ring on his thumb, a storage device. I swept my consciousness inside. The hall was massive. 500,000 copper coins, dozens of technique scrolls, and 20 low-grade spirit stones. Time to grow, I whispered. I entered the tower space again. With these stones, I had enough energy to train for 42 years inside. I sat down and focused. It took me 20 years of focused meditation, but I finally fused my sixth spiritual aperture. I threw a test punch. 12,000 pounds of force. That was the kind of power usually reserved for warriors with 12 apertures. I had over 20 years left. I decided not to rush the seventh aperture. Instead, I focused on my techniques. I picked 3 new ones: sword finger, mountain shaker, and 7 scars palm. I practiced until they were second nature, reaching peak mastery in all of them. When I finally stepped out of the tower, only a second had passed in the real world. I went back to my hiding spot and waited. An instant's worth of time passed. Then, a new figure entered the plaza, a young man with a black sword strapped to his back. The light gate remained open, and a young man stepped through with a smug grin. It was Tang Hao. He looked around the empty plaza and laughed, clearly believing he was the first one to pass the 8 gates trial. I watched him from the shadows, tightening my grip on my weapon. I was ready to repeat my previous tactic and take him out quietly, but the air suddenly rippled. Figures began to materialize all over the Tuasha Plaza, teleporting in almost simultaneously. I counted at least 30 or 40 people. Confusion broke out instantly. "This is the Central Plaza," someone shouted. We were still in the middle of the trials. How did we get here? Tang Hao's smile vanished. He quickly ducked behind a pillar, not far from where I was hiding. I realized he was planning to play the fisherman, waiting for the top contenders like Huang Qi and Su Fu to kill each other so he could swoop in. But more than anything, I knew he was waiting for me. He wanted a killing blow the moment I appeared. The energy must be running out, someone guessed, looking at the flickering arrays around the plaza. The ruins can't support the trials anymore. The final inheritance is wide open. That realization turned the crowd feral. If the trials were broken, it was a free-for-all. "The inheritance is mine," a warrior screamed, charging toward the light gate. He didn't make it 5 steps. A flash of saber light swept across the path, forcing everyone back. A middle-aged man with a heavy blade stepped forward. It was Su Fu, a seasoned veteran who had reached this stage multiple times in previous years. "Heaven is on my side today," Su Fu roared, laughing at the failing energy of the ruins. "This is my chance." He dashed for the gate, but the crowd wasn't about to let him walk away with the prize. A young man in silver robes barked an order to the elders guarding him. "Stop, Su Fu. Clear a path for me." The elders lunged forward, but Su Fu didn't flinch. He gripped his saber with both hands and unleashed a devastating strike. "Dominant saber slash," he yelled. The blade light was terrifying, nearly cleaving 2 warriors in half and forcing the rest to scatter. He landed right in front of the gate, his blade still humming with power. "He's mastered a yellow-grade technique to perfection," someone whispered, fear creeping into their voice. "With his 4-grade bloodline and that mastery, he's invincible at this level. Maybe we should wait and see if he fails the final test first." A few opportunistic warriors moved to Su Fu's side. "Su Fu, we'll help you block them," they offered. "Just remember us when you get the inheritance." They drew their swords to cover him, but before Su Fu could enter, Tang Hao exploded from his hiding spot. His sword was a blur, aiming straight for Su Fu's head. Su Fu barely managed to bring his saber up to his chest to block. The impact sent him flying backward, his boots skidding across the stone floor. "Tang Hao," Su Fu spat, his eyes burning with rage. "You were here the whole time?" "I've been waiting," Tang Hao said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Then why didn't you just go in?" Su Fu asked, gritting his teeth. "I told you before," Tang Hao sneered. "I wasn't going to let that trash, Lin Yuan, leave this place alive. But it looks like the waste couldn't even pass the trials. What a disappointment." He turned his gaze toward the rest of the group. "The rest of you can stay back. None of you are my match." To prove his point, he released his aura. The air pressure in the plaza shifted violently. The younger disciples gasped, their faces turning pale. 10 spiritual apertures, someone cried out. "He only had 9 a few weeks ago. He's already opened the 10th. The crowd was stunned. Tang Hao was only 16 with a 3-grade bloodline, yet his progress was monstrous. Everyone knew the Ghost Sword King had poured massive resources into him specifically for this inheritance. It looked like the investment had paid off. Against 10 apertures, even Su Fu and the others stood no chance. Su Fu, Tang Hao said coldly, do you still want to fight me? Su Fu bit his lip, his knuckles white on his saber hilt. He knew he couldn't win. Tang Hao smirked, satisfied with the silence, and turned toward the gate. That's when I made my move. I heaved Huang Qi's lifeless body from the shadows, launching it directly at Tang Hao's back. He sensed the projectile and spun around, his face twisting in shock when he recognized the corpse. He sliced the body apart in midair, blood spraying across the tiles. As the two halves of the corpse fell, I burst through the red mist, my sword already swinging. Tang Hao barely reacted in time to parry. The clash of steel echoed through the plaza, and to everyone's horror, it was Tang Hao who was forced back several steps. Lin Yuan, Tang Hao hissed, his eyes wide. You killed Huang Qi. The crowd erupted in whispers. If I had killed Huang Qi, it meant I was likely the first one to actually finish the trials. I did, I said calmly, leveling my blade at him. Do you have the guts for a life-and-death duel? Tang Hao blinked, looking at me like I had grown a second head. The other warriors stared in disbelief too. I was the scrap grade failure with 7 apertures. Tang Hao was a genius with 10. To them, I was committing suicide. Are you serious? Tang Hao laughed, a dark, jagged sound. He looked at the crowd. Listen up. I'm going to kill this trash. If any of you try to sneak into that gate while I'm busy, I'll hunt you down and slaughter your entire families. Su Fu and the others backed away, giving us space. Tang Hao drew his black sword, his aura turning cold and sharp. He lunged, executing the Ghost Sword Style's Iron Cutter technique. It was the same move Chu Feiyong had used, but Tang Hao's version was faster and far more lethal. Iron Cutter? I muttered. Is that all? I reached into the void of my storage ring and drew the Fire Spirit Sword. It came out like a bolt of lightning. With one fluid motion, I thrust forward, my blade piercing straight through his momentum and shattering his technique instantly. The legendary Ghost Sword style didn't seem so legendary anymore. Tang Hao flew backward like he had been struck by a bolt of lightning. His eyes were wide, filled with pure disbelief. He never imagined that his first real strike would be deflected so easily by a nobody like me. He looked at me as if I were a monster, but I didn't give him time to think. It was time to end this. I narrowed my eyes and activated the Violent Spirit secret art. I channeled the spiritual energy from 5 of my apertures at once, letting the power flood my veins. I swung the Fire Spirit Sword with everything I had. The blade cut through the air, moving so fast it left streaks of light in the void. Tang Hao's face turned pale. He scrambled to raise his ghost sword, desperately trying to parry my assault. Our blades collided repeatedly, a rapid-fire succession of metallic clangs echoing through the plaza. But with every hit, Tang Hao felt a force he couldn't comprehend. His body shook under the pressure. Finally, the ghost sword flew out of his hand, spinning into the dirt. He followed right after it, crashing into the ground and coughing up a mouthful of blood. His aura withered instantly. Your strength, how can it be this high? Tang Hao gasped. He looked terrified. He had opened 10 apertures. In the world of the aperture realm, he was supposed to be a top-tier genius. There shouldn't have been anyone in his generation who could overpower him like this. During our clash, he felt it clearly. My strength was far beyond his own. Only someone with 10 apertures or more could possess that kind of raw power. To him, it was impossible. A scrap-grade bloodline was supposed to hit a wall at 7 apertures. I had broken the laws of nature. Is that all? I shook my head, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I'm the trash your senior brother talked about. Yet here I am, crushing a genius like you. My words hit him harder than my sword. It was like a sledgehammer to his chest. His face turned ghostly white, and he spat out even more blood. The humiliation was eating him alive. You dare insult me? Tang Hao screamed. I'll kill you. I'll take you down with me. He went insane. I could feel his energy becoming unstable. He was preparing to self-detonate his apertures. It wouldn't kill him, but it would destroy his cultivation base and ruin his foundations forever. He was throwing away his future just to get a chance at killing me. Lin Yuan, I didn't think you were this strong, he hissed, his face twisted in a mask of madness. But you're still the one dying today. The ghost's sword in his hand, which he had somehow scrambled to grab, erupted with a violent, jagged shadow. It was the fifth strike of the ghost sword style. The sword's shadows danced in the air like a demonic ritual, locking onto me from every direction. There was nowhere to run. He wasn't holding anything back now. I tapped my foot against the ground and lunged forward. My body moved like a spirit cat, light and effortless. Thanks to my internal organ tempering, I wasn't just stronger, I was faster and more agile than ever before. I slipped through the gaps in his unstoppable technique with ease. It's useless, Tang Hao roared, his eyes bloodshot. You can't block this. Even if you blow up your apertures, you're still weak, I said calmly. I won't lose to a scrap grade, he bellowed, his voice turning into a shriek. I won't. He swung his sword frantically, sending waves of terrifying shadows toward me. He looked like a cornered animal, desperate and ugly. I just smiled coldly. I might have a scrap-grade bloodline, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. But this scrap is more than enough to slaughter a successor of the ghost sword. I pulled every bit of energy from my 6 active spiritual apertures, swirling them into a massive cyclone of power within my body. My aura surged, instantly overshadowing his frantic energy. I swung the fire spirit sword one last time. A massive storm of sword chi erupted from the blade, creating a violent gale that seemed to swallow the sky and the earth. The sound was deafening, a grand and powerful roar that drowned out Tang Hao's screams.